Jan's awkward grimace was a work of subtle art. She kept it plastered across her delicate features as we took a moment to absorb her preposterous request. The slowly dying sunlight lowered through the single filthy window of her cramped bedsit room, brushed the corner of her soft cheekbone, and made twinkling highlights in the lustrous black of her fluffy hair. Her impossibly beautiful eyes pinched in a squint as if preparing to receive a punch on the arm. It was technically a smile. Her bow-shaped, pale pink lips were curved upward, after all showing pearly white clenched teeth. The sort of smile that told us she knew her request could not possibly be granted, but hoping against hope that we were either very stupid or very kind. It was a very teenager smile, the smile one pulls when mom and dad are not impressed, and one cannot charm them like some pretty little pixie, but one is old enough that mutual respect is not completely impossible, if only they would listen. If Jan was some kind of fake, then she was a perfect actress at playing her apparent age. But how could such a young woman be an accomplished mage? The answer was standing right next to me, of course, with her bent spine and her maimed hand and her missing leg, gripping her scrimshawed bone wand. Evelyn. But Jan didn't look traumatized or damaged, she didn't even act strange, not by our standards. She was eloquent and petite and displayed a proper fear response to a bunch of dangerous people pointing weapons at her. "Heather, you don't look damaged on the surface," I reminded myself. "Don't be so quick to judge. Maybe she's just a girl." Her eyes, like sapphires burning with internal fire, suggested otherwise. Just a girl, very interested in the contents of our heads. My head. And there was only one thing in my head besides myself. Evelyn finally processed Jan's request. She snorted. "You want to look inside our heads? Right. Nice try." Jan's grimace deepened into a wince. "I'm not taking the mickey." Jan's grimace froze and her gemstone eyes flickered to me. She looked like a hunter who'd been caught by the tiger, on the latrine with her gun far away. Twill put her hands up. All right. I was just being poetic. It's not like I want to think about that stuff either. The sheriff word cult never looked inside my head. Twill, I said out loud, but I said it to Jan, speaking directly to the wary, waxen look coming over her expression. All I did was give them the fractal. Yeah, I know, Twill whined. I was trying, you know. Intimidate. 'S what I'm here for, right? You're here to tank, Rain said. Twill rolled her eyes. Heather, is it? Jan asked, having gone very still indeed. Her pale throat bobbed with a dry swallow. The ace of spades playing card in her hand, the one she'd pulled from some private pocket dimension, was quivering slightly between her fingers. She carefully placed it down on the bed, on the opposite side of her lap from her pink handgun. Her fear was back, worse than before, and hard to conceal. She wasn't that good an actress, she could only harness what she already had. I tried to watch her right hand in the corner of my eye, watched the gap between her fingers and her willingly discarded pistol, that scrap of polymer and plastic in girlish pink, such an absurd color for a weapon. If my worst suspicions were right, she might be willing to grab the gun and shoot me, even at the cost of her own life. My bioreactor was already spooling up more power inside my abdomen, shunting biochemical control rods out of their channels and flooding me with energy, making me want to bounce on the balls of my feet and plate my front with extruded steel. 3 of my tentacles moved to cover me, to catch a literal bullet if need be, though Jan could see that, couldn't she? I opened my mouth and almost said something like, "Grab her gun, please, or I think this young lady is about to try shooting me," but I knew she might dive for the weapon if I cried a warning. Or worse, she might produce more than a playing card from up her sleeves. I wet my lips, heart juddering, bowels going tight. Rain must have noticed my tension, because she shifted her footing, as if ready to move. Preem stepped forward 1 pace, back within range of the girl on the bed. In the back of my mind, I began to ready the first burning figures and aching principles of an equation I'd only used once before. Once, to save Rain's life, I'd deflected a bullet. Could I do so again, preemptively? That's my name, I said. I even smiled. And what lives in your head, Heather? Jan asked. Those deep blue eyes seemed to draw me inward. I couldn't look away, as if they were windows to an ocean. If I answer that, are you going to pick up your gun and try to shoot me? My voice barely shook at all. Jan blew out a long breath. I don't know, really. I guess I'm supposed to, but there's not a lot of point now. As I said, this is just a job. If you're infested, well. She shrugged. Maybe we can come to an agreement. Maybe you can pay me to go away. Pay you? Twill snorted. I like the sound of that, Evelyn said, though her tone did not agree. A token amount. Jan lit up, eyes flicking away from me at last and roving across the others. I let out a breath I hadn't known I was holding. Buy out my contract. No, really, I'm serious. I'm not a hero, I'm just looking to get paid, and I can hardly spend money if you decide to encase me in concrete and throw me in a river. £100? She grimaced again, knowing she had no chance. 50. 20. Seriously, one of you, just stuff a fiver in my bag there. Remember, Evelyn raised her voice, we still don't know where her demon host has gotten to. We are still before the jaws of a trap. It's not a trap, Jan protested. It's a sensible precaution. Then where is she? Evelyn hissed. The thing in my mind is bigger than both of us, I said slowly. Bigger than all of us here. Bigger than this entire world. You do not want to meet it, you do not want to look inside my mind, because it will drive you mad. I barely keep it at bay, with magic I don't even understand, and frankly I doubt you have much chance either. And it has taught me the most horrible things, the keys to reality, like toxic waste in my mind. You do not want that in your head. Jan interrupted me, eyes wide with hope. I'm sorry. Head. Head. You said mind. Did you mean mind, or did you mean head? She looked between all of us, suddenly more animated, a smile peeking back onto her delicate lips. She brushed her fluffy black hair behind her ears. I saw Rain twitch, almost go for the kill shot, and Jan flinched so hard she threw her hands up in surrender. But she rattled on quickly. Because I don't care about what's in your mind. I don't care about your thoughts. You could be like her, she nodded at Preem, for all I care, you could have a whole legion of demons in your mind and I really would not be bothered one slightest bit. It would be terribly hypocritical of me, anyway. I blinked at her in confusion. Rain shrugged but kept her pistol trained. Twill puffed out a breath. Preem didn't move. In your head, or in your mind? Jan repeated, trying to maintain her smile. Let's clear this up. The eye, I said out loud, tentacles twitching, fully expecting her to pull some impossible death magic from thin air. It's in my mind, yes. Not my head, physically. Are you after the eye? Don't make us speak its true name, because the true name hurts to even hear, it really sucks, it. She's not after the eye, Evelyn said softly, but with such conviction that we all looked at her. Indeed. Jan said. That's a bit of a coincidence, but I don't know what the eye, singular, is, but that doesn't sound like what I'm here to find. My mother had notes on you people, Evelyn said. She took a deep breath, finally removed her hand from the designs on her bone wand, and rubbed the bridge of her nose. Her painfully gray expression was gone, color coming back into her cheeks. She rolled her neck left and right, which produced a clicking and grinding of vertebrae. Took me a moment to recall. Jan grimaced, more embarrassed than afraid. I'm only working for them, I'm not one of them myself. The army of the third eye, Evelyn sighed. She tapped her own forehead with a sigh. Trepanation hole. Third eye. Get it? Oh, come on, Twill sighed. You're kidding. You mean this isn't about the eye? I asked. Our eye, I mean. Army of the Third Eye. Goodness, that's an awfully confusing name. Why does everything to do with magic have such stupid names? I found myself almost panting to get my breath back, talking just to feel normal. My tentacles slowly lowered as I realized Jan was no longer tense with the need to grab her gun and shoot me. I concentrated to force control rods back into my bioreactor, like struggling with occulted internal muscles. Jan pulled a very awkward smile indeed, quite embarrassed. They're a cult, Evelyn went on, frowning at January. Quite an old one, too. 30 years or so now, if they really are still around. My mother's notes said they fizzled out about 25 years back, too many of them dead, too much attention from the mundane authorities. She glanced at the rest of us. They let off a couple of car bombs in London in the early 90s and tried to assassinate an MP. According to my mother's notes she redirected her attention back to Jan, still hard and uncompromising even if not ready to kill her anymore. You need to prove you're not lying. I know of the people you claim to work for. Explain what you're here for. If your words don't match my expectations, I will have Rain here shoot you. Evie, I hissed. She'll do it, she totally will, Rain said, pulling a resigned smile with her lips pressed together. She will not, Preem intoned. I am trying to present a credible threat here, Evelyn said, rolling her eyes. I already did that, I said. I think. Then I undermined myself with a truly gargantuan hiccup, so bad it actually hurt my diaphragm. Jan flinched and I blushed slightly. Sorry, I said, trying to take a breath. Too much of all this. Is she okay? Jan asked. I'm fine, I said, rubbing my sternum. Answer the question, Evelyn grumbled, though her tone seemed utterly resigned to the growing absurdity of a true misunderstanding. Jan puffed out a sigh and pulled that uniquely teenage grimace again, half embarrassment, half like a worm exposed under an overturned rock. The Army of the Third Eye is hardly a cult, she said in that delicate voice. That's a bit much. They don't understand anything about magic, they're basically a bunch of normies who got overexposed and couldn't deal with it. And what do they want? Evelyn said it wasn't even a question, she was just utterly exhausted by this moment. Jan cleared her throat and blushed. They believe the British government and general establishment types are being mind-controlled by giant alien insects. From space. What? Went Twill. Rain raised her eyebrows. I said. Giant? Yes, go on, Evelyn sighed, making a get-on-with-it hand gesture. Well, giant in relative terms, Jan said. She held her hands about a foot apart. About the size of a pigeon. Sort of mottled gray-green. They look a bit like a giant fly but they've got many more limbs and lots of eyes, and they're supposed to curl up and hide inside human skulls, entwined with the brain matter itself. Supposedly they can read memories and then pilot the host with suggestion and mental torture and look, she hurried to add, though Evelyn was already nodding along, I don't believe a word of this. The army have a lot of sketches of these things but only one blurry photograph. You and I, if you are all what you claim to be, we both know that it could be a photograph of anything. Some demon, something from the beyond, something a stupid and irresponsible mage cooked up once. This all matches up, Evelyn sighed, possibly the most exasperated I'd ever seen her. Giant alien space bugs? Twill asked, in the tone one might say magical polka dot clowns. My theory, Jan said, quite apologetic, is that these poor fellows encountered something, years and years ago, something magical that they couldn't deal with, that they couldn't process. So, cultural expectations took over, maybe one of them was into UFO stuff, so giant mind control space bugs. Maladaptive coping strategy, Evelyn said. That happens, rarely, when somebody can't process exposure to magic. She finally let go of her bone wand and casually passed it to Preem, then flexed and massaged her stiff fingers. Rain raised her eyebrows at that. Evie, you sure that's a good idea? I've only ever met 5 members of the army, Jan said, and I think that's all that's left. They're all in their 60s now and they're all absolutely deep in awful paranoia. It's really quite sad. They've all performed trepanation on themselves in the past. They believe sunlight kills the bugs. So, when your friend, she cleared her throat, turned up in Sherriford General Hospital with a hole in his head, one of them read about it in his regular Google search for news with the word trepanation. She pulled another grimace smile. They paid me a lot of money to suit their paranoia, that's really all there is to it. I'm supposed to check out this Nathan fellow and make sure it's not relevant to them. But they are paranoid, and if it doesn't involve trying to kill government ministers, I think they really will break out the improvised explosive devices. Excuse me? Twill said. I'm not following a word of this. Why am I not surprised? Evelyn shot her a very tired look. Normal people got exposed to magic and couldn't deal with it. Maybe one of them got a demon in his head or something. That was my mother's conjecture, anyway. Right, okay, Twill said, trying really hard. So there's not actually any giant alien space bugs? No, Evelyn said, very slowly and very carefully. But they explained it to themselves with giant alien space bugs. I asked Jan directly. Jan nodded, smiling. They really believe this? They really believe it, yes. They're paying me a lot of money to confirm a giant alien space bug did not come out of Nathan's head. I've heard and seen a lot of absurd things since I stumbled into all this, I said, but that has to be some kind of record. Jan winced. I do apologize. No, wait, you were about to shoot me. I said, pointing with both one hand and a tentacle at the pink gun on the bed. You were about to reach for that thing. I'm not very experienced at reading people, but even I could see that. Oh yeah, Rain said, soft and low. Another couple of seconds there and I would have made you a third eye of your own. Jan's beautiful, impossible, gem-like eyes twitched for a moment. I thought she was about to finally reveal her true weapons and turn us all to stone with a charmed look. My tentacles jerked up to defend myself, defend my friends, block her gaze, but then I realized with an embarrassed flush that she'd barely resisted an urge to roll her eyes. She was, in fact, staying extra polite. The gun, really? She muttered, faintly amused. Of course I was about to defend myself. I thought I'd finally run into the real thing. So you do believe in the alien space bugs? I asked. Jan's resistance crumbled, she rolled her eyes. No, of course not. What do you take me for? I've done this same job 3 times and I've never seen anything to suggest the army aren't just a bunch of well-armed lunatics, but well, your man Nathan is clearly disturbed, and not only by the hole in his head. She shrugged, just as delicately as she did everything else. That fit the pattern described by my clients, but it's the first time I'd seen it. I did hunt down something that had come out of him, but that seemed unrelated, so I was ready to dismiss it and get back to business. The skin man that came out of Badger, Rain said, nodding. Your zombie ate it. Of course she did, Jan said. It reeked of him, we needed to get rid of it. Also, excuse me zombie. Whatever she is, Rain said. Did you make that thing? It was horribly unhygienic. Nah. Rain shook her head. We were trying to get rid of it too. And what is your business, exactly? Evelyn grumbled. Beyond this job. Making money. Jan raised one hand and rubbed her fingers together. But then you hunt me down, I bring it up, and you get defensive. You start telling me there's something in your head, so yes, of course I was getting ready for action. Goodness me. She sighed, pursing her lips and shaking her head at me. I thought I was about to be face to face with giant alien space bugs. That's what you signed up for, ain't it? Twill said. Jan sighed and gave Twill a pinched look. She was about to open her mouth and carry on. She seemed to like the sound of her own voice. Either that or she was practiced at long-form distraction. But I pushed in before we could get further off track. This doesn't actually explain anything, I said, my tentacles still up. How did you track Preem? How did you know we were out in the street just now? How can you see my tentacles? What was the second job you mentioned, from what group of people? And what about your eyes? I was about to say, but those eyes flickered to me and seemed to hold me still by virtue of their sheer beauty. Yeah, Rain added. She hadn't moved, but suddenly her gun seemed to loom larger. You're good at the runaround, I'll give you that, but you've missed a detail. Jan blinked at Rain. Yes. Badger would have contacted us if you'd seen him in the hospital, Rain said with an awful smirk, the smirk of a hound cornering prey. You're still lying. Checkmate. Of course he wouldn't have. Jan tooted. I threatened him. You've got him in there with no protection at all. He thinks I'll come back and kill him if he breathes a word to you. Ah, said Rain. Shit, went Twill. She's got us there. We're kind of bad at this. Oversight, said Preem. Still doesn't explain the second job, hey. Rain pressed. Evelyn suddenly snapped, of course it explains that. Am I the only one of us capable of extrapolating from available information? She frowned around at all of us, an exacting schoolmarm with a clutch of particularly slow students. She stared at me. I expected better of you, Heather. I'm sorry. Never mind, it's not your area. I suppose this is why I'm your strategist, she grumbled, then ignored me in favor of January. You were talking to the rest of the survivors from the Sherrowford cult, weren't you? Badger's remaining friends and contacts. That's all the places you were visiting 2 days ago. And they wanted you to do something about us. Jan sat up straight, settling her petite frame into a semi-formal pose, hands cradled in her tiny lap. Guilty as charged, though it's not a crime. Do something about us? Rain echoed, a dark smile in her voice. Jan cleared her throat. They offered to pay me, well, not very much money, to confirm if Nathan is alive and well or not, if his mind is intact, and so on. They gave me a promise of further pay if I could, and I quote, pry him out of their clutches. That being you, of course. Dangerous job, you know. Rain purred. We're dangerous people. We are not, I muttered, vastly uncomfortable. Absolutely, Jan said with a swallow and an awkward smile. Really, you have to understand, I only took the job because I was pretty sure that Badger, goodness, he does look like a Badger, doesn't he? How apartment? I only took the job because it was pretty obvious that he's fine, except a tiny bit of brain damage, but that's to be expected. He's hardly under duress and seems to absolutely adore you. She nodded at me and my stomach turned over. My plan was to wait for him to get discharged, meet you through him, and then get paid twice, once for confirming the obvious absence of alien space bugs, the other for freeing Badger. She sighed and flopped her hands against her lap. Didn't expect you people to act like territorial cats. Considering what you did for Nathan, I assumed you were, she paused for a tiny laugh. The good guys, to some extent. There are no good mages, Evelyn hissed. We are the good guys, Twill said, a bit shrill with offense, frowning. She glanced at the rest of us. Good girls, whatever. Good girls, Preem intoned. Yeah, Twill echoed, then caught our mixed expressions. What? Maybe we better leave those definitions to posterity, I said. Rain was shaking her head at January. This might be convincing, Evie, but I think you're being a touch too talkative. You're pointing a gun at me. Jan said, outraged in the exact way a teenage girl would be at something so obvious. Look, I'm not here to be a hero, I'm here to get paid. I can't exactly enjoy the bit that comes after getting paid if my brains are splattered all over the back wall of this total dump. What a place to die. She gestured with her eyes at the horrible, cramped bedsit room all around us. Want me to tell you anything else about the job? I will, because you're pointing a gun at me, duh. And you have one of your own, Rain said, still level and cold. Oh, for, Jan huffed, started to reach for the pink handgun, then stopped with her fingers splayed. Can I pick this up and hand it to you without being ventilated? It'll prove a point. Rain glanced at Evelyn, who shrugged. She pulled the 3D glasses from her pocket and peered through them at the gun. She's not trying to hoodwink us. Rare for you, Evie, Rain said. This is too stupid not to believe. Get on with it. I don't think there's anything magical about it, I said. But that's just me. Don't smell no silver, Twill added. Frowning but cautious, Rain nodded, took one hand off her own pistol, and held it out to accept Jan's gun. Jan picked the weapon up by the barrel and held the grip out toward Rain. Frowning surprise flickered across Rain's face the moment she took the absurdly pink firearm in her own hand. Rain? I asked, suddenly alarmed. Oh, you're kidding me, Rain laughed, hefting the weight of the gun. Taking extra care where she pointed the barrel of her own pistol, she pressed a catch on the side of the pink gun, slid out the bit that held the bullets, glanced inside and snorted, then clicked it back into place. She pulled back the slide and looked into the chamber, shaking her head. She gave Jan a look I'd never seen before, actual exasperation, but tinged by professional interest, almost admiration. You absolutely had me going. It wouldn't be any good otherwise, Jan said with a musical, girlish giggle. Then Rain aimed the pink gun at Jan's stomach and pulled the trigger. I almost screamed. Subconsciously I'd understood exactly what I'd seen, but my forebrain had taken just long enough to catch up that for a split second I thought Rain was summarily shooting this girl in the belly. A gasp escaped me, panicked hands and tentacles whirling, half to catch the bullet, half to yank the gun out of Rain's hands, one tentacle lingering to forestall Jan's inevitable and probably deadly response. But instead of a deafening bang and the awful sound of metal going through meat, the pink gun produced a dull pop. A little white pellet bounced off Jan's thick black sweater. Hey, ow. Jan flinched. That still hurts a bit. Twill started laughing. Evelyn sighed. Oh come on, Rain sneered. It's sub-airsoft. This wouldn't even hurt a mouse. Looks the part though. She turned the pink gun over appreciatively. Pink ain't my style, but what is this supposed to be, some kinda subcompact? I have no idea, Jan said. I'm not into guns, personally. Twill, Evelyn grunted. Stay on task. She's still a mage. Excuse me, Rain, I managed to say, keeping my voice steady. Can you maybe warn me next time you shoot somebody? Heather. Rain blinked at me, then lit up with concern. Oh, shit, you thought it was real? I thought you were shooting her. Yes. I would never, Rain said, dead serious. I mean, I would, if she was a threat. But not in cold blood. Unless we had to. Good to know, Jan said in a stage whisper. Just warn me next time, instead of pulling the theatrics, please. I asked, trying to force my heart rate back down. You bet. Promise, Rain said, all humor forgotten in the way she nodded to me. Gotta admit it had style though. Bang bang. She pointed the fake, girly pink gun at Jan again, miming firing off rounds. Her own pistol was aimed carefully at the floor. I gave her such a look. I think they really do make pink guns, you know. Twill said. Like, real ones. If we are all quite finished playing with toy guns, Evelyn said as Rain handed the utterly harmless airsoft pistol back to January. I think this establishes where we all stand. This really does have nothing to do with us, I said. Well, except the bit with the leftovers of the cult. Yes, I'm pretty sure she's telling the truth, Evelyn grumbled. She was hunching up harder than before, leaning heavily on her walking stick, and unsuccessfully suppressing a grimace. Her free hand wandered down to rub at her thigh, then scratch at where the seal paper was irritating her stomach. My own seal was an itchy mass by now, I desperately wanted to peel it off. And I need a sit down. This means we did the right thing then, hey? Twill said, gesturing around the room. We came to talk it out, instead of shooting first. Success. It didn't feel like a success, our moment of unintended silence spoke volumes. We had barged into Jan's rented hovel, pointing weapons and making threats, very much being the bad guys, until she'd explained herself. From one perspective we were blameless, we had no idea what she was, she could have been anything. Still could be anything. But she was very small and looked so very vulnerable sitting on that bed, engulfed in her knitted jumper, with her slender legs stretched out over the side, pillow in her lap. Between her fluffy black hair and her delicate facial features, she looked like the sort of girl who should have been on the edge of a friend group in school right now, comfortably eating a Pop-Tart or a cookie or some other nondescript sweet thing, not in this filthy room surrounded by a group of dangerous creatures. Except for her eyes. And the way she'd pulled a fake gun and a playing card from pockets of nowhere. It was very difficult to keep in mind that this girl was a mage. Sorry, there really is nowhere to sit, Jan said with a sigh. The chairs are terrible, they came with the room. Evelyn grunted, the tone of a woman who knew there would be no sitting for a while yet, but she still glanced behind her at the opposite bed frame, bare of sheets or even a mattress, just that guitar case sitting there. I'm not sure it would be a good idea anyway. You're not totally unarmed, we are still dealing with a real mage here. As you proved earlier. What else are you hiding up your sleeves? Jan smiled. Wouldn't you like to know? I would, actually. Oh, nothing special, Jan said. She touched a spot diagonally upward from her own forehead and her fingertips appeared to vanish for the blink of an eye, as if passing behind an invisible curtain. Rain twitched her gun up and Twill was about to surge forward, which surprised me so hard that I flinched, but Jan's hand was back in a blink, holding a Chupa Chups lollipop. She unwrapped it and popped it in the corner of her mouth, then spoke around the stick. Defenses, of course, yes, I won't deny that. But I don't need defenses if you're genuinely not going to point a gun at me anymore. Evelyn sighed and shook her head. Mages, I hissed. Bloody show-offs. One more question, Rain said. She tilted her head at the guitar case behind us. What's in the case? Magic sword, Jan said around her lollipop. Long story. Magic sword? Rain asked. Magic sword, Evelyn sighed. Magic sword, Preem echoed. Magic sword, yes, don't sound so surprised. Go on, open it if you like, I can't lift the thing. We never use it, anyway. Evelyn nodded to Preem, frowning hard. Preem stepped over to the opposite bed frame, undid the clasps on the hardshell case, and lifted the lid. A sword, plain as day, lay nestled in a bed of old t-shirts and plastic carrier bags. It looked totally unremarkable, even a bit tarnished. Whoa, Twill muttered. All right, close it up, said Evelyn. That's enough of that nonsense. Preem closed the lid while Jan swung her legs back and forth over the side of the bed, enjoying her lollipop. We all shared a confused glance. Evelyn was about to speak, but Twill got there first. Right? Jan echoed. And you took a job, which you knew wasn't a real job, because, you know, giant alien space bugs. And then you took another job, but you only took it because you knew it would mean almost no work. Like, you weren't actually planning to fight Heather and Evie for Badger, you just knew it was already cool. You were gonna get paid for doing nothing. Twice. Went Jan, increasingly like a deer in headlights. Dodgy dealer, Preem intoned. You're a con artist, Twill said, mouth hanging open. You're like a mage con artist or some shit. Jan winced, drawing a sharp breath through clenched teeth. She waggled a slow finger at Twill. That's a very harsh piece of terminology there. That's very accusatory. Rain laughed. Twill's got your number. Hasn't she? I'm a magical problem solver. Yeah, fake magical problems, Twill said. Jan sighed and surprised us all by flopping backward on the bed, arms outstretched. She lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling through the slats of the top bunk. It was so very teenager that none of us knew how to react. Fake magical problems usually end with very grateful people paying me large sums of money, she said to the dirty ceiling. You know how real magical problems tend to end? Blood and terror, Evelyn muttered. Yes. Jan suddenly sat back up, looking at us like we were all idiots, despite the smile on her lips. Real magical problems, the kind that you find people seem to be suffering, end up with getting dead. And I don't want to be dead. I should know, tried it once already. No thank you. I like getting paid, and I love getting paid twice for the same job. Money buys all sorts of lovely things like better living conditions than this, good food, a nice dress or two, the occasional book. Making sense, am I? So pack away the sanctimonious judgment of how I make a living. It's not as if I have many other choices. And trust me, I've tried most of them. You're still a con artist, Twill said. And you're a terrible tracker. We knew you were there behind us the whole day. TCH, Twill tooted. Jan's little outburst was like watching the lenses realign in some piece of esoteric clockwork. It brought this whole situation into clear focus at last. She was no innocent child, and we were not the nasty monsters leering over her. She was like a rat, a furtive thing beneath the floorboards, and here we were with torches and crowbars, prying our way into her particular underworld. And now she was frozen in fear, ready to bite perhaps, but mostly hoping she could convince us that she wasn't getting into our grain. This still doesn't explain how you can see my tentacles, I said, a little more harsh than I had intended. Or how you could tell what preem is, or how you knew we were out in the street. Jan blinked at me in surprise, those incredible eyes trapped behind thick dark lashes. I'm quite sure it doesn't explain everything. I'm sorry. Look, I'm willing to tell you people whatever you want to know about me being here, because you've decided you're all joint queens of Sherrowford or something. But I'm not spilling all my secrets to you. Some things are just not your business. She is still a mage, Evelyn grumbled. Whatever else she is. Quite right I am, Jan agreed. Why the bloody hell were you wearing a school uniform? Twill gestured at the neat, smart blazer and skirt hanging from the opposite bed frame. Jan shrugged. It's wonderful camouflage. I'm the right size for it. It's your eyes, isn't it? I finally blurted it out, forcing the words up my throat like I was overcoming some terrible taboo. Nobody else has mentioned them. Am I the only one seeing this? I glanced around at Evelyn, Rain, Twill, and Preem, and met blank, uncomprehending stares. No, Preem intoned. I see. Oh, I breathed. What about her eyes? Evelyn went tense, then pulled out her modified 3D glasses again, fumbling them onto her face as I spoke. They're abnormal. It must be how she saw my. But the words died in my throat when I looked back at January. Those burning gemstone eyes had gone wide in shock, framed by a deep red blush blossoming in her cheeks. One pale, delicate, small-nailed hand was raised to cover her mouth. You can see, oh my goodness, she gasped, then turned half away from me and shaded her eyes with one hand. What? That's quite embarrassing, she squeaked. That's very private. It's only your eyes, I said, dumbfounded. It's me. It's me. How can you see that? She protested, glancing at me around the side of her hand. Then she realized Preem could see as well and unsuccessfully attempted to hide from both of us for a second, before giving up with a very haughty little huff. She crossed her arms and sat there, fuming and blushing like we'd walked in on her naked. I'm sorry, but I don't follow, I said. Evelyn gestured hurriedly at Preem, waving one hand for the return of her bone wand. She gripped the weapon tightly again, tucking one end of it under her armpit as she stared at Jan through the glasses. Evie. Rain murmured, raising her pistol again. Hey, what? Twill added. We fighting now? What are you? Evelyn hissed at Jan, her jaw set with sudden tension, eyes hard, mouth a tight line. Excuse me? Jan asked. I said, what are you? Evelyn repeated, then whipped the glasses back off and looked Jan's petite form up and down. Her knuckles were turning white on her walking stick. What am I actually looking at here? Jan blinked. I'm sorry, I don't follow. Jan's jaw dropped and her brow creased with outrage. She took the lollipop out of her mouth. Excuse me. You can't just ask that. Where did you get that body? Evelyn said, throat thick with emotion, losing control. My body? Jan gaped at her. My body is none of your business. 2 and 2 crashed together in my mind and added up to a gut-wrenching, blood-chilling 5. Evelyn's sudden blinding rage made perfect sense. Here was a mage who was very unlikely to be the age she appeared, claiming and demonstrating experience beyond her years, in the body of a young girl unblemished by the kind of exposure damage that Evelyn had endured. Eyes were a window on the soul, and Jan's told of something very different inhabiting her body, but not a demon. Older, cleverer, perhaps not the original owner. Oh shit, Rain hissed, leveling her gun at Jan's head again. Preem took a half-step so she was almost in front of Evie, shielding her. Twill seemed confused, but her hands swirled into claws all the same. We were back on for a fight. Excuse me, but no it isn't, Jan snapped, outrage overcoming fear as she raged back at Evelyn. Look, I'm willing to be open with you people but not. Then I will have it out of you one way or another, Evelyn hissed, her fingers shifting across the scrimshaw designs on her bone wand. Then Evelyn yelped in surprise at the feeling of one of my tentacles wrapped around her wrist. An invisible grip held Evelyn back from committing torture. She turned on me, eyes blazing. It was a miracle the room did not erupt into violence, as only Preem could see what had happened. Rain was staring Jan down while Twill didn't know which way to turn. Heather, Evelyn hissed in my face. You let go. Evie, she has an unbound demon host, I said quickly, my own pulse like a drumbeat in my throat. Like Preem. That she is not keeping a slave has to mean something. Evelyn actually bared her teeth at me. She might be like. But she might be nothing like your mother, I rattled off as quickly as I could. And I'm not going to let you get blood on your hands over a mistake. Please. Evie, please. She's not even threatened us. Please. You did the same for me. Evelyn's eyes blazed, her jaw set tight. She pulled at the grip of my tentacle around her wrist, but then relented, staring back at Jan, who was still sitting there with her arms folded, outraged almost beyond words. I still have to know, Evelyn hissed. Yeah, Rain said, clicking her tongue. That's a red flag all right. I'm not following a bloody word of this, Twill muttered. Are we doing a fight or what? Jan, I said, struggling to keep my voice level. I'm sorry, but we do need an answer to that mystery. For personal reasons. Either we need a satisfactory answer to what you are, or Evelyn will very likely torture it out of you. And if she's right, then I'd be inclined to let her. I don't think she is right. Please. Jan stared at me, outraged and afraid in a way I'd never seen on a person before. Those beautiful eyes like the sky over a perfect sea were holding back a threat of tears. But she held her head high. What are you going to ask next? She said, cold and angry. What I've got in my underwear? I winced. No. Never. We just Evelyn here, she's very sensitive about the subject of stolen bodies. Joint, Preem intoned, then added, they will understand. Jan stared at Preem, then let out a shaking sigh. Fine. At least one of you shows a modicum of respect. Preem bowed her head. It did not take an expert in body language to read that apology. Jan reached out with both hands and began to roll up the right sleeve of her comfortable black jumper, revealing the crisp white fabric of her blouse underneath. She undid the tiny button at the cuff of the blouse, fingers fumbling a little with nerves, then rolled that up too. Smooth, pale, perfect skin slid out, a very slender and dainty forearm. Blushing hard with fury, struggling not to show her tears, she pushed the fabric back up past her elbow, then held up her arm and flexed the joint so we could all see. My jaw dropped. Evelyn stared for a second, then swallowed, letting go of her bone wand and averting her eyes. Rain let out a low whistle. Guess that explains why she doesn't smell of anything, Twill muttered. Jan's right elbow was a ball and socket doll joint. Colored like flesh, but not truly alive. She flexed the joint back and forth, then wiggled her fingers and rotated her wrist, and the trick became clear. Once one had seen the obvious fake of her elbow joint, the seams along her wrist and fingers were much harder to hide, as was the line where her neck joined to her skull. The illusion fell away as if it had never been there. She was using a technique very similar to Preem, clothing a doll's skeleton in numismatic flesh yet somehow visible and tangible. Whole body? Rain asked, injecting her voice with that utterly judgment-free question she'd once used on me, to disarm all my fears. Whole body, Jan hissed, barely able to speak from sheer humiliation. Is that enough for you? I think that explains everything, I blurted out, then hiccuped in horror at what we'd done. I'm so sorry we forced you to do that. Yeah, hey, Rain cleared her throat. I think we kinda crossed a line there. Yes, Evelyn snapped. Yes, of course No wonder you were so interested in Preem, I said. It is beautiful, Preem intoned. Jan scrubbed her eyes on her sleeve, trying not to show her tears, but Preem's words drew a tiny jerk from her. I wasn't sure if it was a sob or a hiccup, but she got a grip on herself quickly and raised a sarcastic smile to me and Evelyn. I do hope you're satisfied now, she said. I apologize, Evelyn stammered out. I had to know, We made a mistake, but we had to do it, I said, then regretted that instantly. We hurt, oh, dear. Jan gave me a look that said she didn't care. Oof, Twill said out loud. Evelyn stopped trying to talk her way out of this. She straightened her spine as best she could, planted her walking stick firmly, and grabbed a fistful of her own skirt, then pulled upward until she revealed the matte black carbon fiber of her prosthetic shin and knee, showing off the artificial leg like a war wound. Jan shook her head, lips pressed together, not impressed. It's hardly the same, is it? My mother attempted to cheat death by taking my body, Evelyn said. Jan stopped, actually listening. Evelyn's chest rose and fell with emotional effort. Over her shoulder, I saw Twill's eyes go wide with shock. Oh Evie, I silently whined. You never told Twill. I was to be left in her rotting carcass, Evelyn continued, though her words were forced, clipped, pushed out with great effort. She did this damage to me, and more, prior to that attempt at possession. I have never considered the proper course of action to take if I encountered a mage who has successfully carried out her failed method of life extension. I had to confirm, she trailed off. I covertly slid my arm through hers and placed my hand atop her fingers. She flinched, eyes flickering to me, but then steadied. The worst of Jan's outrage had subsided in the face of this confession. She half nodded, a sideways tilt of her head, an acceptance, at least. She finally put her lollipop back in her mouth, though didn't seem to be enjoying it very much. I would like to know who I am dealing with here, Evelyn said, voice still tight. Are you human, or a demon in a doll, or? I was born Homo sapiens, yes, Jan said, softly but still a little peeved. And how old are you? 18. Jan shot Evelyn a look again, daring us to call her bluff. I am trying, Evelyn said, to afford you the respect we have violated. 18, Jan repeated. I have been 18 for a very long time. Trust me, the body determines more about the mind than one expects. As you probably well know. Just treat me as what you perceive, please. We can do that, Rain said, stepping in so easy and confident before Evelyn could put her foot in her own mouth again. May I ask a question? I said. You may as well, Jan sighed. What am I seeing when I look at your eyes? I've never seen eyes like that before. They're beautiful, I trailed off, lost for words. You are seeing me, she said. In here. A moment of silence passed. I think I understood. If you made your own body, why are you so small, said Twill. It was a genuine question. There was too much innocence in Twill's tone for it to be otherwise, but I winced all the same. Evelyn put her face in her hand. Rain raised her eyes to the ceiling. Jan pursed her lips and gave Twill a look. Have you perhaps considered that I was also this same size previously? Oh, Twill said. Right. Okay, cool. Is she simple? Jan pointed at Twill and asked the rest of us. Sometimes, Evelyn grunted. Oi, said Twill. I am so sorry about all this, I said, feeling both mortified and relieved. At least this was better than anything else that could have happened. Just. Jan nodded awkwardly, but then crossed her arms, looked out of the window, and shoved the pillow off her lap, then pulled it back again and cuddled it to her chest. I think I'm ready to leave you people and your stupid city, she said. But right now I am feeling quite vulnerable, so I do apologize, but you're going to have to deal with this. She reached out with the fingers of her right hand and stroked the air next to the bed. Those fingers had shown seam joints along every knuckle only a minute or two ago, but now the illusion had firmly re-established itself. Fleshy digits briefly vanished from view, but for much longer and far deeper than her card trick or hidden sweet pocket. She swiped her hand through the air like whisking back a curtain. And Zhang's mysterious zombie friend stepped out of thin air. On the scale of a human being, the effect was dizzying, like watching a person appear around an invisible doorway. It stung my eyes and forced me to blink, though the particular qualities of the person joining us made my heart skip a beat and my tentacles fly up in a protective barrier. Twill growled in her throat and went halfway to wolf. Rain's hands twitched to raise her gun, though she resisted the urge. Evelyn gasped and bumped against me. Preem just stared. We'd all gotten used to living with Zheng, to some extent, to her big cat rumbles and her tiger-like quickness, but not all demon hosts were alike, in frame or aspect. The woman who stepped out of thin air could have walked down any Sherrowford street and been accepted as perfectly human. She was tall, perhaps 6.5 feet, with long black hair the same as Jan's, tied into a neat braid which reached all the way to the small of her back. She wore simple jeans and a practical gray coat full of pockets, over some kind of hooded athletic top, with trainers on her feet. The family resemblance Preem had mentioned was obvious. She and Jan were sisters, at the very least. They possessed the same delicate facial features, neat little nose, and compact mouth, all set in a heart-shaped face. The demon host lacked the impossibly beautiful eyes, stormy gray instead of electric arc blue, but her stare was wide and emotionless, eyelids pulled so open that one saw a thick band of white around her irises. Her stare reminded me of an owl, made me feel like a rodent, waiting for the claws. But it was the way she moved which set the little hairs standing up on the back of one's neck. She moved like she stared, focused grace in every muscle, twitchy and bird-like, ready to lash out at a moment's notice. The tension in her frame reminded me more of Rain than Zheng, that strength and mobility like a set of steel cables beneath cloth and skin. Was this what Jing admired? An ember of jealousy smoldered in my chest. I thought about my mobile phone, currently muted for safety, and Jing waiting on the other end. Should I call her, get her in here? Force the confrontation. These people are horrible. I need a who, Jan started to say, then yelped and put a hand to her mouth. She saw at the same moment we all did. Her demon host friend was carrying a surprise visitor, a large, well-fed, sleek-furred fox, curled up in her arms like a cat. You again. Evelyn snapped, entirely at the fox. Oh hey, Twill lit up. It's back. Jan went quite shrill. Where what I didn't put that in there with you. The demon host turned to look at Jan. It must have been a spectacularly unpleasant feeling to have that attention spin around to you, like an owl hearing a rabbit a mile downwind. She was already present, the woman said. To my surprise, her voice was perfectly ordinary, with the same delicate tones and precise pronunciation as January. She stroked the fox's head and neck. She is quite safe. Quite friendly. Very clean. Very clean, Preem-intoned. I could have sworn the fox gave her a look. The demon host turned to Preem. At this, the fox decided it was time to get put down again, and wriggled in the demon's arms until she stooped and placed it on the floor. Claws clicked across the wooden boards, bushy tail swishing behind her. Evelyn shuffled back nervously as the fox padded past us and over to the door, as if asking to be let out. She looked up at me, then at Evelyn, amber eyes muted in the grim surroundings of this horrible little room. What are you? Evelyn hissed. The fox let out a warbling yip. What was it even doing here? Jan asked, as perplexed as we were. I don't understand how it could possibly get in. I think she was attempting to broker a peace, I said haltingly, watching the fox for a reaction. The animal just stared up at Evelyn. She led Jing back to us, which broke up the fight. In theory. Anyway. You know this animal? Jan asked. This is yours. She's not ours, Evelyn said. But we know her. The fox nosed at the crack between door and frame, then glanced back up again. Can you stay a moment? I asked her, unsure if she understood. We're not done here, not yet. Jan sighed and decided we were all mad and this was really none of her business. She turned back to her very tall demon host and stuck her arms out. I need a hug. These people have violated me. Again, sorry, I said with a wince. Yeah, really, Rain added. Apologies. She's still a bloody mage, Evelyn said. And that is a demon. I heard everything, the demon host said. The way she spoke, the cadence and rhythm, had just a touch of Preem's manner about her. The intonation, the precision. We're not using real names. Who am I right now? Oh, that, Jan sighed. It hardly matters now. This is July. She nodded to the demon. July and Jan, Evelyn deadpanned. Why do I not believe that? Believe whatever you want, Jan said. She waggled her arms. Up at the taller lady. July, hug. Or I suppose you think I deserved all that. You do not deserve cruelty, July said. She bent down and wrapped her arms around Jan's shoulders, giving her a reassuring yet politely brief hug. But you should have expected this. You smell like fox, Jan said into her shoulder. You just let her take it, huh? Rain asked the big demon. July let go of Jan, straightened up, and turned her owl-like stare on Rain, a cold searchlight of predatory attention. Rain didn't flinch, but she did stiffen, muscles subconsciously readying for action. She stared back, two predators sizing each other up. You wanna go? Rain murmured. No. If you had pulled the trigger, July said, unblinking, would have caught the bullet and spat it back at you. Then she transferred her attention to the fox. But I was assured that would not be necessary. Yes, Preem intoned. July met Preem's gaze. For a moment, the two demons stared at each other as well, almost equally blank. I'm sure you understand, July said. I am the perfect height, Preem said. Why is she unbound? Evelyn asked, gesturing toward July with the head of her walking stick. Jan gave Evelyn a look like she couldn't believe her ears. That is none of your business. Do you people just make a habit of barging into everyone's life and demanding to know all their private business? Is this how you keep other mages out of your city, by being incredibly rude all the time? You have an unbound demon. And so do you. Jan pointed at Preem. You called her your daughter. Exactly. So you know my reasons. What are yours? It's none of your business, Jan said. Mages, I huffed. It's like herding cats. It is, July agreed, staring at me. I struggled not to flinch from that look. Her eyes followed my tentacles bobbing up to defend me. You are an octopus. I sort of, yes. I'm not having you walking around my city with an unbound demon, Evelyn said. But I do need to understand your reasons. Well, fine. Jan huffed back. Because I am leaving. I'm obviously not going to get paid for any of this. Jan, I spoke over the argument. I would like to pay you for a job. Everyone stared at me. Even Preem didn't know where I was going with this. Oh. Jan said. I cleared my throat and overcame two obstacles at once. Part of me was screaming to just hustle these two out of Sherrowford, out of our lives, to get July away from Zheng. But another part of me whispered with the true knowledge of what I had to do. I crammed that jealousy down deep. If I gave into it now I would never forgive myself, because others would pay the price. The other obstacle was solved with great embarrassment. I turned to Evelyn and said, I need to borrow some money. I'm so sorry. She blinked at me, so surprised she was speechless for a second. Anything, she said. Thank you. Right, yes. Well. January. I want you to get all of the cultists together, all the survivors, everyone Badger knew. I want you to be a bridge for them, to us. Oh dear, Jan said, swallowing delicately. Real magical problems. I really don't think I can accept this one, I'm sorry, but we're not going anywhere, said July. Excuse me. Jan squeaked up at her. July locked eyes with me, wide and staring. Deep down inside, abyssal instinct screamed, she knew. She was taunting me. I would like to meet Zheng again, she said. That is our price for the job. July did not share Jan's impossibly beautiful eyes, neither their subtle light like gemstones dropped in embers, nor their blue like the shimmer of a baking summer sky. She did possess Jan's delicate facial features and her thick black hair, though braided instead of short and fluffy, but July's eyes were gray, mundane, human. The irony was not lost on me, considering she was a demon, a thing of the abyss wrenched from the limitless dark sea and placed in a new home of human flesh, just like Zheng. And just like Zheng, her stare was predatory and dangerous, though in a very different way. Her eyelids were permanently held wide, so one could see the white of her sclerae. Her stare was like an owl listening for the scurry of a rodent, wide and still and silent, where Zheng would have narrowed her gaze, razor-sharp. July held herself so still that she didn't appear to breathe. Zheng would have rumbled and purred. This demon host waited like a bird of prey or a trapdoor spider, unmoving until I tried to break one way or the other, promising pursuit in the outline of her muscles. She stared at me with eyes the color of a looming storm, awaiting my answer to her price. But I was not the prey for which she lay in wait. She wanted Zheng so very badly, and she knew I was the one to negotiate with, perhaps intimidate, or simply needle and provoke. Abyssal instinct simmered with territorial warnings, marked her as a rival, and whispered inappropriate urges up the trunk of my hindbrain. My tentacles crept outward to make myself look bigger, to display a warning, to prepare for a fight. July's predatory intensity and my wordless response had stilled the others too. Though they couldn't see my tentacles, they must have felt the change in the air, because Evelyn was turning pale and Rain looked ready to start slitting throats. Twill flexed her hands into wolf claws. Jan's eyes went wide at the sight of my tentacles reaching outward. Even the Say Fox was uncomfortable, head ducked low to the floorboards, trying to go unnoticed. Only Preem didn't react. Fight? A very sensible part of my mind butted in, almost screaming. You're going to fight a demon host over Zheng? In this cramped and dirty room, surrounded by people who might get hurt? You don't even have sex with Zheng. You don't own her. Stupid, stupid Heather, I cursed, getting hold of myself and forcing a deep breath into my lungs. If I truly wanted July gone, I could just send her outside. She'd be as good as dead. But I couldn't do that, could I? I found my mouth had gone very dry indeed, my pulse a hydraulic piston in my throat, head going light, hands cold and shaking. I may have dragged a portion of my abyssal truth into the air and light of reality, and grafted it to my flesh. I may have taken 3 steps towards the unalloyed glory of Homo abyssus. I may be supported by brain math and pneumosomatic organs and a family of capable monsters and true companions, but I was still entirely capable of making poor decisions over a pretty girl. A meeting with Zheng is not mine to grant, I managed to say, and wasn't sure if I was lying or not. Oh. Rain pulled a big, silly, theatrical wince, grinning like a clown. Good answer, Heather. Outplayed, outplayed. Come on, Bug Eyes, she addressed July, you're barking up the wrong tree. You think we can tell Zheng to do shit? Rain's absurd reaction popped the tension like a knife in a gas bladder. I could have flung my arms around her neck and kissed her for that. Maybe I'd save that for later. I reeled my tentacles back in with an effort of will. Evelyn drew a shaky breath, Twill shook herself, and the fox padded in a little circle by the door, claws clicking on the wood. She even let out a tiny yip. But July was still staring at me. Gray eyes like cold stone. You can, she said. You don't set terms. Jan squeaked up at her from the bottom bunk of the bed frame. July turned to Jan in the most unnerving fashion. She moved her head while keeping her eyes locked on me, then flicked those cold gray orbs round to Jan at the last second. Jan tooted and rolled her eyes to the heavens, as if she was dealing with a sulky child, rather than 6.5 feet of demon host powerful enough to leave bruises on Zheng. I mean, you never do set terms, not that you're not allowed to or something, Jan said. And don't you pull that face at me. You're haggling with your new octopus friend, you can leave me out of it. That way, if we both end up dead, it's your fault. Trouble in paradise, hey? Rain asked. Yeah, great, Twill added. Just what we need, more clowns. Clowns are funny, Preem said. Twill gave her a skeptical look. July stared Jan down for a moment longer, but the mage didn't so much as shiver. I had no idea how Jan could talk to a demon like that, but then I reflected on how I sometimes spoke to Zheng. Eventually you get numb to any level of intimidation. And I couldn't help but wonder about the nature of their relationship. They're just people, in the end, I reminded myself. Even if they're not human. Finally the demon host returned her gaze back to me, but this time I clamped down on the instinct which kept urging me to unscrew her head. Instead I took a deep breath and spent a moment to study her. July, if that was her real name, possessed both Jan's delicate beauty and an obvious inhuman nature, which was really nothing like Zheng upon closer examination. Her wide, staring, owl-like look was deeply artificial, as if she'd broken something in her facial muscles long ago, not akin to Zheng's expressive joy. Between her neatly braided black hair and her unremarkable clothes, there was something austere about her. She lacked Zheng's flair for grand gestures, the poetry of muscle in motion, delight in being physical and embodied. In her practical gray coat and athletic top and jeans, she almost reminded me of Amy Stack. I sighed. How on earth do you walk around in public without scaring people? Zheng can't do that. Normies see what they expect to see, Jan said. You have internet poisoning, said Evelyn. Normies, really? It's a useful word. Actually, Jan rattled on, I take back what I said before. If we're going to do a job, can somebody pay me anyway? July's predilection for your extremely large friend won't put food on my table. Evelyn sighed. Do we really need this? She asked me. You want to finish dealing with the cult's dregs? Well. Words stuck in my throat, stilled by July's stare. And I couldn't lie to Evelyn. Sounds like you should be the ones paying us, Rain said with a laugh. She rolled her neck and her shoulders to work out the tension, which also functioned as a nonverbal signal that the threat of violent confrontation was well and truly over. Flicking the safety on her handgun and tucking it away inside her jacket was an afterthought. She chuckled to herself again, shaking her head. I think I was the only one who picked up the false note, the performance, the way she forced herself. For a moment I thought it was some kind of ruse, that she was about to draw her knife instead and peel July's face off for insinuating things about Zheng. A tiny, twisted, ugly part of me cheered for exactly that outcome. But then I realized, Rain knew violence, inside and out, far better than any of the rest of us did. She was the only one of us who could truly de-escalate this moment, because she appreciated the nature of our position. Forget the gunboat, Rain should have been the diplomacy. Pay you? Jan wrinkled her nose in disgust, as if a dog had just taken a huge dump in front of her. For what? Are you going to demand a fine for trespassing? Twill lit up with a laugh too, following Rain's lead, unconsciously or not. Yeah, that's right. You gotta pay the Sherrowford troll toll. For Zheng's time, duh, Rain said. She cast about with a dirty smirk. What do we think her rates should be, £100 an hour? Ha! Twill barked. Nah, she's rare, she's high class, she's picky, so more like 300 an hour. £300? Jan squeaked. No. No way, absolutely not, stop this. July, don't say a word. Done, July said, hard and harsh and heavy, like we were concluding a deal to sell a black market nuclear warhead. No sale, Preem intoned. We are not pimping out Zheng. I said, going quite shrill. A terrible, angry blush shot up my neck and cheeks. My tentacles clenched and shook with an urge to run wild, but I kept them in check. The say fox went Europe. Rain shot me a wink. I'm only joking, you know that. I huffed and folded my arms across my chest. You're very lucky she's not in here with us. She wouldn't stand for it. All I want is to meet her again, July said, staring at me with those owl eyes. I am not demanding sexual favors. I know that, I stammered, you fought each other. Maybe we will do so again, July said with a touch of rough, raw relish in her voice. That is up to Zheng. What is it with demons and fighting? Twill asked. Preem doesn't do this. Why can't you be more like her, hey? You can talk, Rain laughed. None dare, Preem intoned. You could say that, Evelyn answered slowly. She was frowning at July with what was rapidly looking like professional interest. But that's not what matters. What matters is upbringing. Is she yours? Mine. Jan said. In a manner of speaking. I suppose. Deny all you want, July said. I don't deny a thing. Jan tooted. I was shaking my head through all of this nonsense. I can't agree to this. You and Zheng, you hurt her, I saw the bruises. Were they permanent? July asked. Well, no, but. Is Zheng yours to command? Oh, here we go, Jan sighed. She crossed her arms, wiggled her feet over the side of the bed, and stared up at the ceiling, as if she'd heard this a million times before. She rolled her lollipop back and forth in her mouth, loudly clacking it against her teeth. "I'm sorry?" I asked. "Is Xing yours?" said July. "Do you own her? Do you direct her?" "She does what I ask, but only because I ask," I said, and I knew that was a lie too. When Zheng had returned home with the trophies of her fight still fresh on her skin, she had been glowing with savage glee. I had not forgotten her tale about the vampires she had once met in the past of Eastern Europe, the strange love that had blossomed from the alchemy of combat, something I could never share, which no human could ever reach. I couldn't hold Zheng back from this. I wasn't sure if I had the right to try. "But she's no slave," I added, my throat closing up. "I don't own her. She's her own person." Rain raised both hands. "She didn't actually step between us, but she may as well have done so. How about we get the lady herself in question up here, and ask her what she wants, if she'll be willing to do this deal?" "No," I blurted out, then regretted it, because Rain hitched an eyebrow at me in surprise. She didn't get it, not completely. Not in the way I did. I hurried to cover my embarrassment. "I mean July, please, why do you want her? What do you expect to happen?" July did not smile, but I swear the corners of her mouth twitched. "I would like to resume our contest," she said. "Contest," I echoed. My worst fears, coming true. But then my mobile phone buzzed in my pocket to alert me to a text message. I dug it out, horribly self-conscious because I knew exactly who it was going to be. "Shaman. Answer," was all it said. I fumbled at the keys, sending a reply to let Jing know that I was okay and safe and everything was fine and no, she didn't need to come crashing in through the window to save us. "It's her," July said. "Isn't it?" I glanced up as I composed the message, but chose not to reply. Evelyn tapped her walking stick on the floor to get everyone's attention. "I think we need to discuss exactly what this job is going to entail. And what exact payment is being demanded here and She trailed off, her carefully constructed thoughts interrupted by the say fox. The animal had been waiting close to the door, but finally decided to pad back into the room, drawing closer to Evelyn. It looked up at her hip, then toward her face, as if trying to communicate. She shuffled away from it, bumping against my side as I tried to send the text message to Zheng. Wait, Jan spoke into the opening, as if remembering something. She patted July's hip. Wait, July. We're not agreeing to anything until I know why exactly you want me to be your bridge back to all those sad people with the head problems. I do have professional standards to keep." "What do you care?" Twill grunted. "You were conning their money out of them." "I may be a con artist," Jan almost snapped at her, in the way a Chihuahua might snap at a Doberman. "But I will not aid in committing mass murder. And forgive me for presuming, but you do seem like a bunch of very dangerous people. And I know for fact you're rude and invasive." "I'm not going to hurt them," I sighed, feeling a headache coming on. "I want to help them." Zheng's reply buzzed into my hand. "Long time. Is she there?" July craned her neck to see, so I tilted my phone screen away from her. I chewed my bottom lip so hard I was about to draw blood. "Tie up the loose ends," Evelyn grunted. I approve of that part. They do need to be dealt with, one way or another. That could be just as bad. Jan squeaked. "You're going to trepan all 10 of them? That's going to get you on the radar of local authorities, and I mean mundane authorities, police, probably important police. I imagine a spate of mystery holes in heads is going to make a big splash in the newspapers. And if there's one thing that sorts like us need to avoid, it's big splashes in newspapers." She caught Evelyn's eye as she spoke and Evelyn nodded along, making a grumbly thinking sound in her throat. "She has a point there, Heather," Evelyn added. "It's an incredibly risky move." "Be quieter to kill them all," Twill said with a grimace. Not that I'm saying we should, course. I wouldn't. Nah. I stammered and stumbled. Yes, I know, but we can't leave them like I was hoping maybe Jan here. I was trying to do too many things at once. Controlling 6 tentacles was child's play compared to lying to Jan to get her to stay in Sherrowford, while also maneuvering July so she wouldn't meet Xing again, and wrestling with my internal guilt and jealousy, as well as thinking up the right response to get Xing to stay safely tucked away without outright lying to her. Because I couldn't do that. I couldn't just lie to Xing. This was giving me a headache. Hey, Heather, Rain said, trying to help, sounding so confident, but missing the mark by a mile. If this isn't gonna work, we can always just wait for Badger to get out of hospital. He's living proof we're not gonna feed them all to the eye or whatever. We can do it that way. We can make it work. I know that, I hissed, sounding like an irritated donkey. Rain's eyebrows went up. I saw the silent ah of realization behind her eyes, and busied myself trying to compose another reply to Xing. Yeah, Twill said. What do we need these 2 clowns for? Rude, Preem intoned. Rude, July agreed, somewhat harder. Twill bared her teeth at July, but it was more playful than aggressive. The demon didn't rise to the challenge. Evelyn frowned at me. She may not have worked out the truth, but she could see the discrepancy. Heather, she hissed my name. I was rapidly losing control of the situation and I hadn't even tried to reel in the bait yet. Excuse me, Jan's voice suddenly cut through everyone else, delicate and light, with a promise of hidden playfulness. My head was drawn up to her as if by strings. She caught my eyes with her burning blue, a girlish smile on her lips. I can see you need something, Heather. I'm right, aren't I? How? Jan's sweet act collapsed into a slouching shrug and a deadpan glare at Twill. The magic broke and it wasn't real magic, just sheer charisma. I felt a terrible blush rising up my cheeks. I am only trying to help, Jan said. You're trying your shit on with her. It was kind of obvious, Rain sighed. It's just me, being me, Jan protested. I'm not on the job all the time. Besides, Heather has already agreed to pay me. Sort of. Maybe. Xing, July said to me. Message her. Tell her I am here. Tell her to come. Aha, July, one moment, please, Jan said. I'm very serious, Heather. If there's something you need from me, from a mage, that you perhaps can't express in front of your friends, then we can always ask the others to step out and... Doll, Preem intoned. Jan blinked at her quite suddenly, as if slapped, as if offended. I think it was real. I sighed, all my carefully laid plans collapsing into a pile of rubble. She's not talking about you, I said to January. She's figured out what I'm after. Oh. Jan glanced between me and Preem, suddenly alarmed. I drew myself up as best I could. January. We could use assistance with the cult, that much is true. There is something in their heads, and they need help, whatever they did in the past. They don't deserve this. Nobody does. There's 10 of them, apart from Badger. That's a lot of people, and you're correct, I can't put them all in hospital with suspiciously similar wounds, that would be a nightmare. The police already looked into Badger when we put him there, they think Rain is his friend. We don't want more attention than we've already drawn, I don't know what would happen. So we need ideas, experience, help, anything you can do, really. Well, Jan swallowed and pulled a car salesman smile. As I've already said, that's a real magical problem, and I'm not exactly inclined to get involved in real magical problems. But. Jan echoed me quickly. But if all I'm doing is making introductions and acting in an advisory capacity, I could be convinced. For the right price. The price is a meeting with Xing, July said, utterly unwavering. Jan sighed and rolled her eyes, a very see what I have to deal with gesture. I bet yours doesn't act like this, she said to Evelyn. Quite, Evelyn said, watching me sidelong. She could tell more was coming. But there's something else I want, I said, a lump in my throat. And I need you to take this request very seriously. Please. Go ahead, Jan said, soft and pleasant. If it is possible, I would like to commission from you another body like your own. An artificial body, for a different inhabitant. Jan Sayle's face froze as if dashed with wet concrete. Ah, Evelyn sighed. Oh, went Twill. Oh, shit. Rain winced. I wasn't sure what that meant, but I wrote it off for now, kept it in the back of my mind. Jan unfroze her expression via application of some emergency emotional hair dryer, her smile stretching to maximum artificial sweetness. If you want to put a demon inside some wood or plastic, well, you already have a far better example than I could achieve. She gestured at Preem, who nodded her head in acknowledgement. I don't know what you could possibly want me for. It's not for a demon, I said. It's for a human. Homo sapiens. You said you built your own body. Could you do that for somebody else? I assume it's not just off the shelf. I winced. Terrible phrasing, I'm sorry. It's not off the shelf, no, Jan said, her smile so hard it was cracking. Will you do it? I asked. Jan's eyes, the color of blue flame inside spun glass, maintained their careful sales pitch temperature for about another half-second, then her expression melted into cold ash. She wasn't smiling anymore, face pinched with cautious pity. She bit her lower lip, which somehow made her look older, not younger, and looked me up and down. Her eyes traveled along my tentacles with confused pity. I curled them close to my body, suddenly self-conscious. You don't want this, she said. Unless you've got inoperable cancer, or something worse. You're a marvel, look at yourself, you're beautiful, you don't need this. It's not for me, I blurted out, blushing. Whoever it's for, the point stands. You don't want this. There are better ways to attain one's own ideal body. Hell, there are much better mundane ways to transition from one form to another than when I was your age. Jan stopped cold, then blinked several times and cleared her throat. Forget I said that, please. Look, you don't want this. It's better than no body at all, I said. Please. Heather, Evelyn said through her teeth, we don't need her for this. What was the point of fixing Sarika? I thought that was your plan. It won't hurt to have a backup option, I replied. Ripping Sarika from the eye, remaking her, I still don't really understand what I did. And Maisie, you've said it yourself. We don't know what might be left of her. She needs a body, in case I can't perform a second miracle. I hadn't even thought of it before now. Jan was frowning at us, trying to follow along. Somebody without a body. Somebody dead. Look, I'm good, but I'm no necromancer. I don't think I can help you. Wait, hold on, Twill said. Are necromancers real? Walking skeletons and stuff? No, July answered for Jan, voice hard and sudden, like a bird's cry over lonely mountain peaks. She's not dead, I said to January. She's outside. She may not have a body anymore, or she may not be human anymore. We don't know. When we rescue her, I may need somewhere to put her. Jan started shaking her head, and not in the way of a master haggler trying to appear reluctant, to drive the bargain higher. She crossed her arms, frowning delicately but sternly. How much to make it work? I pressed. However much it takes, I suspect, Evelyn grumbled. I turned to Evie, face burning, and struggled to look her in the eye. I couldn't do this without your money. I'm sorry, I have to ask for. Don't be, Evelyn said, almost as hard as July's voice. To my incredible surprise, she reached over and awkwardly patted my side, as if she wanted to touch me but didn't know how, though her hand quickly retreated again, like a nervous rodent testing a new friend. Then she turned to January. And don't tell us it can't be done. Jan did a very teenager gesture, a combination sigh, slouch, and roll of her eyes. It was most impressive. Twill even snorted. The fox, still lingering by the edge of Evelyn's skirt, let out a little yip and did a hop, which made Evelyn flinch and frown down at the dubious creature. Demons have no internal logic to impose on a body, Jan said, then gestured at Preem. She's your daughter, yes? I assume you made her, and she's not grown horns and spikes, so you know what I'm talking about. It's a myth, it's nonsense. Evelyn grumbled, gesturing at Jan to get on with it. The fox circled around the back of her skirt, then nosed between her and I. You can put them in wood, plastic, bits of rubbish, whatever you want, Jan went on. And they adapt the vessel, given enough time, but the expectations of that adaptation are imposed externally. But a human being? Jan shook her head. In something that started as flesh, as one of us, there is a hunger, for flesh, to be the right kind of flesh your mind says you should be. Her eyes found my tentacles again. Humans can't just inhabit anything you force them into or which nature forces them into, for that matter. They need a specific environment, it's individual, personal, not off the shelf, no. I expect you understand that, Heather. I do, I said. I really do. But something outside, you said. The beyond? You take somebody who has been changed, and you put them in the wrong body, it might be like torture. I don't care how much you pay me, I have some limits. She's my twin sister, I said. The body would need to be based on mine, she would be familiar with that much. I can make additions from there, once she's in it. Does that assuage your worries? Jan went wide-eyed and stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Oh my goodness, you people really are in deep. You're twin. But does it mean you'd do it? Well, I guess. She threw up her hands. Holy shit. Oh, I don't want to be any part of whatever madness you people are into. And this is a backup option. What's plan A? Straight back to the meat, Twill said with a grimace. I've done plan A before, I said. It worked, I rebuilt a human from her thoughts alone. But it cost me too much. Next time there won't be anyone to send me back, if my anchors fail. I need a foundation to put her in. Jan raised one eyebrow. Your metaphors are getting a little deep for me, dear. I sighed. How much to make a body like yours? Money cannot buy that. She shook her head. No deal. I don't believe you, said Evelyn. You're just scared. Some mage you are, you pissy little coward. Excuse me. Jan squeaked. I'm bloody right to be scared, by the sounds of it. You people are dealing with things far beyond what I get paid for. No, absolutely not. We're out. You don't have to be involved, I said, glancing at Evelyn. She nodded very slightly, letting me take the lead after her surprise attack on Jan's pride. You just need to make the vessel. Name a price. Vessel, Jan echoed, ostentatiously unimpressed. It's not as simple as that. Every part of my body had to be handcrafted. By myself. She raised a hand and wiggled her fingers, the dull joints were currently invisible, but one could almost see them if one squinted. The process of creation was the process of inhabitation. Making a life-size model of somebody else, she looked me up and down and I saw in those eyes a hidden spark of professional curiosity, like the blossoming of a chemical fire. Is it possible, though? I asked. Can you do it? Jan caught herself, looked away, and cast around the room as if for help. She plucked her lollipop from her mouth and stared at it, then put it back again, then removed it a second time before reaching up with it and making it vanish back into whatever pocket dimension she'd pulled it from. In the first place. The optical effect made my eyes twitch, as an object just ceased to occupy space. July just kept staring at me with a silent promise of a poison pill in any deal, but I had to try. "All right," Jan said eventually. £2 million. I blinked. My stomach felt like a block of ice. Rain chuckled softly. Twill went, TCH. But Evelyn stared in a way I'd never seen her stare before. Her jaw tightened to match the tension in her eyes. Slowly, like the pull of a powerful magnet, her irritated gaze drew Jan's eyes away from me, until the Mage's were locked in a silent moment together. Evelyn was so unimpressed she could have been made of stone. Jan raised her eyebrows and cleared her throat, unwilling to let silence linger with whatever Evelyn was filling it with, but Evelyn did not break. She tilted her head forward, until her eyes were deep in the shadow of her brow, shadows cast by the single ceiling light bulb. Jan swallowed, shifting uncomfortably on the bed. "The price still includes a meeting with Zheng," July said. "No." Jan decided suddenly. "No, we are not getting involved. That's that." "You are losing," July informed her. "The other mage has your weakness." Jan swallowed and risked a glance at Evelyn again. Evelyn looked ready to eat a mouthful of bees. £10,000, said Evelyn. I gasped. 2 million was just an absurd number, a meaningless figure. Jan may as well have demanded 10 quintillion pounds and it would have meant the same thing. This is out of your reach. But £10,000? That was a number I could conceptualize, and it was very high indeed. Part of me reeled that Evelyn would make such an offer on my behalf. On Maisie's behalf. Jan puffed out a long breath. I still don't want to do this. The price is Zheng, July addressed me again. A meeting with Zheng. She can decide from there. Round and round we go, Rain said out loud. She pulled a slow wince at me. Should have kept quiet about the doll part, Heather. I'm sorry. Leverage, Rain said. You've given them leverage. I sighed. I know. But there wasn't any other way. I think. Evelyn snorted. There probably was. We're still not doing it, Jan said. And that's final. To everybody's surprise, July responded to this by leaning down and getting in Jan's face. It was like watching a bird of prey intimidate a rabbit. The demon host hung from the bunk bed frame by one hand, the other pressing into the mattress on Jan's opposite side so as to box her in, their faces mere inches apart. The rest of us shared nervous glances, even Rain took a deep breath. The sheer physical intimidation rolling off July stirred instinctive ape fear in one's gut, no matter the direction it was aimed. Twill bared her teeth and growled softly. The fox yipped from between Evelyn and me, which made Evelyn jump and grab my arm. But Jan didn't give a damn. Jan, all 5 foot nothing of her for she was probably an inch or two shorter than me, climbed to her feet on the bed. Or at least she attempted to, before remembering she was sitting on a bunk bed, even her petite stature was too tall to straighten up all the way. Nevertheless, the motion achieved its aim. July was forced to half straighten as well, in order to maintain the face-to-face stare-down, which left her hanging halfway. Jan was stooped with head against the underside of the top bunk. She put her hands on her hips and pouted. July maintained a very awkward pose, all her menace dissipated by looking like she was crouched in desperate need of the toilet. Well, Jan said, this is a fine position you've gotten us into. Take the job, July replied. You're meant to be on my side. This isn't going to end well. This nonsense didn't happen with the last demon you ran into. What's so special about Zheng? God, nobody is even pronouncing that name right. Jan raged, going red in the cheeks. She threw her hands up and stepped straight off the side of the bed, totally ignoring the knife-like demon host right in front of her. She landed like she was made of cotton, the soles of her thick black socks whispering against the battered old floorboards. She put her hands on her hips, scowled at the rest of us. She was indeed shorter than me, which was rare enough. I'm not doing it, I'm sorry, she started. You are an absolute coward, Evelyn said quickly. Jan made a face of amazed offense. July straightened up and took a step toward Jan or toward me, it wasn't clear, because Rain stepped in front of her and tilted her head in a very specific way which meant don't start or I'll start on you. Twill looked like a deer in headlights, ghostly wolf flesh swirling into coherency, preparing for a fight. The fox between Evelyn and I let out a sound like yee-I-roll. Preem turned her head to look right at me, as if she knew I could resolve all this in an instant. And worst of all, my phone started ringing. Zheng was calling me. I stared at the phone screen amid the sudden chaos, paralyzed. Before I could drop the phone or hit the reject call button or perhaps just scream at the top of my lungs, a maimed hand with 2 fingers missing plucked the phone out of my grip and answered the call. Be quiet, Preem said. She didn't shout, didn't raise her voice, but her tone had all the inexorable force of a glacier grinding away the roots of a mountain range. Everyone went quiet. Evelyn cleared her throat and raised my phone to her ear. Hello, Zheng, she said, unimpressed, frowning at me as she spoke. Yes, it's me, Heather's standing right in front of me like a fart in a trance. A pause. Yes, she's here too, what did you expect? No, don't do that. I will have Preem beat you unconscious with a rolling pin if you do that. Another pause. Evelyn sighed. No, she will keep going until we achieve unconsciousness, trust me on that. I think you best come up here in any case. Use the stairs. Don't be seen. Evie, I hissed. No. And Heather has something to add. Evelyn held the phone out toward my mouth. She whispered 2 words. I shrugged, did it even matter now? Shaman, came Zheng's voice, a tinny noise with the speaker so far from my ears. I rolled my eyes and crossed my arms and forced down a mouthful of bile. My tentacles bunched up like a wounded squid. No fighting, I said. Shaman. No fighting. I snapped. Evelyn nodded along. No fighting. If we're going to organize this, we have to do it right. So no fighting. Not here, not now. And no tongue removing or finger breaking either. We're all friends up here. For now. Zheng grunted. The line went dead. Evelyn gently placed the phone back in my shaking hands, frowning at me. I swallowed too hard, then managed to raise my eyes to meet her gaze. She didn't say a word, but I read the confusion on her face, the concern for me and the fragility as well. That act had cost her, stepping into the role of Evelyn Say, Mage and Monster, always cost her. My Evie stared back from behind eyes made hard with effort. She did not understand why I'd crumbled. Or she did, but she didn't like what that meant. I cast about for help and found Rain. For once, Rain wasn't smiling, grinning, smirking, or anything like that. She had one hand raised to ward off July brave but stupid, but she wasn't looking at the tall and imposing demon host. She was looking at me. Our eyes met across the frozen chaos of the tiny bedsit room, with sudden sober understanding, hers pinched with something I so rarely saw on Rain's face. Jealous disapproval too strong for her to hide. But it wasn't aimed at me, it was mine. Rain nodded, almost imperceptibly. She got it. She understood. Rain and I were finally on the same page about Zheng. I took a deep breath and turned back to Evelyn. Thank you, Evie. I'm sorry. She nodded too, awkwardly, and looked away. Back to normal. Great, Jan said. Your gigantic friend is on the way. To do what? Eat my spleen. Evelyn sighed and gestured at me, emotionally spent. I wet my lips and did my best. I think we're going to organize a play date for our respective giant murderous zombie ladies, I said. And I, Evelyn said, am going to offer you £10,000 to build a body for Heather's twin sister. Jan looked away. I still haven't said I'll do it. You will do it, July said. Because I will stay here anyway. She showed no relish, nothing but her bug-eyed stare as she turned to watch the door for Zheng's arrival. Jan gritted her teeth, hands on her hips, most annoyed. They can be impossible creatures sometimes, I said, feeling a little apologetic, like we were dog owners whose pets had become entangled in the park. I know how you feel. Zheng is a handful at times. I am a handful, said Preem. Waiting for Zheng to join us was almost as nail-biting as our own approach to the horrible little bedsit flat. I half expected her to come crashing through the window all these floors up and cause a public incident, or at least to stomp her way up the stairs like a herd of elephants. Twill seemed to expect that too, flexing her claws and craning her neck to get a better look through the window, without getting too close. The low afternoon light hovered over Sherrowford outdoors, high above the window and the buildings beyond, as if we were in a deep, dark canyon. Rain cleared her throat in obvious performance, while Jan stared at a point on the opposite wall, tongue running over her teeth as she considered ways to escape this unwanted offer of a job. July just stared at the door. Evelyn leaned on me, though I wasn't sure if it was subconscious or not. The Say Fox broke the tension, and had us all watching her, when she padded out from between Evelyn and me, her claws clicking on the floorboards. She slinked off around the corner into the flat's tiny little bathroom. A scraping sound reached us a second later, claws on old porcelain, followed by a wet slurp of canine tongue lapping up water. She's not. Twill said. I wrinkled my nose. Ew. Well, she is a fox, Rain laughed. What did you expect? She's not a fox, Evelyn said, a touch too tense. Preem took one for the team, walking over to the bathroom and peering around the door frame. Drinking from the toilet, Preem announced. Confirmed. The fox re-emerged a moment later, licking her chops, then looked up at the flat's front door. Knock knock, came the announcement of Zheng's arrival, two precise yet heavy clacks of knuckle on wood. Preem looked to Evelyn. Evelyn looked to me. I took a deep breath and nodded. No fighting, I repeated, glancing at July. But she had eyes only for her new dancing partner, or at least the door behind which she waited. Preem opened the door and Zheng swept inside like we'd admitted the specter of death itself into the room, filling the doorway. She had to duck, straightening up once over the threshold, towering over everybody else. All her 7 feet of height, her rippling layers of muscle, and her molten intensity were so much more imposing in the small, cramped space, especially with 7 people already in here, plus the fox. She was wrapped from head to toe in a less restrictive version of the way the Sherrowford cult used to keep her hidden, with a knitted hat on her head and a scarf wrapped around her lower face to hide her teeth, the rest of her concealed by her loose and baggy gray jumper, her jeans, and long coat. Her sharp-edged, intelligent eyes found July instantly, like a pair of tigers sighting each other across a jungle clearing. She breathed out like a furnace, a rumble that shook my guts. I said no fighting, I tried to say, but what emerged was a sound like a ball of mice rolling down a hill. Jan had evidently not seen Zheng this close before, because her eyes had gone wide, her face had gone pale, and her fingers had curled shut around a handful of July's jacket. Before Preem even had time to shut the door, Zheng ripped the hat off her head and yanked down her scarf. A grin tore across her face, savage glee framing her rows of shark teeth, all of it directed at July, her counterpart, her mirror image from another angle, her dancing partner I could never hope to match. A lump stuck in my throat. Zheng, July said. That is your name. Ah, Zheng breathed out between her teeth. It was like dragon's breath. Bird of prey, now I see you clear. Hey, Rain started to say, but Zheng was already taking a step forward. With a yip-yap and a blur of russet fur, the fox bounced about 3 feet into the air on her hind legs, a tiny bundle of muscle and claw slamming against Zheng's front. Zheng stopped dead, not because of kinetic force but because of her own care for the strange animal, she didn't wish to knock it aside. Her arms whipped out and caught the fox, then cradled it to her chest. Fox stared up at demon host, Zheng stared back. The say fox whined. Zheng tilted her head. She grunted, then looked up at the rest of us. Her eyes alighted on me. Shaman. I am here. No fighting, I managed to squeeze out. Zheng blinked, slowly. She did not nod. My goodness, Jan whispered, panting. Did you made her? July, you didn't tell me she was so large. I did. Well, you didn't put enough emphasis on it. We didn't make Zheng, I said, finally swallowing the lump in my throat. She's a lot older than us. Bird of prey, Zheng rumbled, and I could hear the playful tease in her voice, the voice of a tiger playing with its food. Here I am, bird of prey. Not distracted now. Excuses, July replied. Ha! Zheng barked, eyes burning like hot coals. You are a fine thing, you are unfettered, and her eyes slid down to Jan at last. The savage glee dropped from her face. Wizard, but small. Wizardling. Does she know her place? Hi, Jan squeaked. Yes, hi, hello. Please don't eat me. You have no quarrel with my maker, July said. Zheng's eyes lingered on Jan for a moment longer. Her gaze did not soften, but when she looked away it was with total dismissal and disinterest. The little mage was unimportant, then, except as a mage who knew not to practice slavery. Bird of prey. My name is July. You are my bird of prey for now. All right, Evelyn raised her voice. Stop flirting. You got what you want. Here she is. Can we get on with the part of this where we wrap this up and get out of this tiny room, please? Are you going to do this job for us, or not? Jan let out a huge sigh of mixed defeat and exasperation. July, we can't stay. I am staying, July said, staring at Zheng. I want a duel. Zheng bared all her teeth. A duel, she roared. The fox in her arms went yer. In her face. Thump 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 came the dull sound of somebody banging on a nearby apartment wall. We all froze, even Zheng. I think we're making too much goddamn noise. Twill hissed. Yes, I said. Clearly the duel is not going to happen here. Or now. Or at all, actually. Shaman, Zheng rumbled, but she didn't even look at me. Fine, I hissed. Should we really be letting them do this? Jan asked. I shrugged. I can't control Zheng. I suppose it's going to happen anyway, now, so we may as well make it safe for them, at least. Oh, goodness, what am I saying? Every step of this is absurd. Is July at least robust enough to be damaged? I am robust beyond her, July said, meaning Zheng. She is, Jan sighed. Technically. Then you'll think about the job, at least. I asked. In exchange for. I felt the most horrible twist of guilt, low in my stomach. I couldn't stand the way July and Zheng were looking at each other. It was like the anticipation of meeting a new lover, mixed with the territorial urination of a pair of apex predators. The less charitable part of me, the twisted little gremlin who could put sevens to shame, couldn't help thinking of them like a pair of hounds in heat. I felt sick. Badger isn't getting out of the hospital until next week, Evelyn said, low and serious, her mind running through the implications on our plans. And Nicole is still searching for the house. We have time for this, if we must, though not long. Your choice, Heather. It's not my choice anymore, I said, struggling not to stare at Zheng. She wouldn't even look at me again. She had eyes only for her special new friend. For Zheng, fighting was transcendent. Fighting was love. I could not share this. Hey, left hand, Rain's voice cut through the mutual attraction, a pair of scissors through a live wire, unexpectedly hard and cold. Zheng's attention swiveled from July to Rain. Her brow creased in surprise. Little wolf. Why her? Rain asked. Why not me? My jaw fell open, I couldn't believe my ears. Bad girls, Preem intoned. Zheng tilted her head at Rain in surprise, a tiger considering a rival. If she'd had ears to match, they would have perked up. You are fragile, little wolf. You cannot match me. What if I can? Zheng blinked. You cannot. I respect your attempts. You know this. And we swore an oath. Still hurts, Rain said. Some other bint should not be getting first dibs on you. Little wolf. You better not lose, Rain said. Because that's mine. You don't give that to anybody else. Zheng couldn't tear her eyes away from this. To be fair, neither could anybody else. Nobody had expected this reaction. My mind was racing, was this real, or was Rain putting it on for my benefit? A few months ago, I knew it would have been the latter, but now I wasn't so sure. Do I even want to know? Twill pulled a face. Shit, you guys are too complex for me. Quite, Evelyn said through her teeth. She glanced at me with vague accusation in her eyes, but I just shrugged. This was new to me too. Evelyn squinted with obvious skepticism. Rain laughed and turned from Zheng, as if the whole thing had been a sick joke. But she turned to July, face to face. Hey there you, she said. When July refused to look away from Zheng, Rain raised her hand and clicked her fingers, once, twice, 3 times. Pay attention, bug eyes. You're dealing with me for a sec. Either you look at me or I'm gonna make you look at me, and you don't want that. July did the same for Rain as she'd done for Jan, moving her head without her eyes, then finally flicking her gaze at the very last second. Something about it made me flinch, as if the motion dredged up some instinctive response. Evelyn flinched too, then huffed a swear word between her teeth. The fox went yerp in Zheng's arms, bushy tail bristling. But Rain didn't flinch, not at all. July stared at her with those propped wide eyes, but Rain just grinned right back. Hey there, freaky, Rain said, soft and low and infinitely dangerous. A shiver went up my spine. How did she do it? How was she more intimidating than Zheng? If she'd spoken to me with that tone, I would have melted into a puddle of goo. July raised an eyebrow. That was all. I'm gonna give you a warning, Rain carried right on, still grinning. You do not need to warn me, dog. Yeah I do, Rain purred. See, I'm cool with you and Zheng having your little play fight. That's your business, her business, whatever. I'll deal. But if this is a ruse, a trick, a plan. If this is all just to get to her under false pretenses. If you actually harm her, for real, with some below-the-belt shit that has nothing to do with your honorable duel. Then I will step in and gut you like a fish. The corners of July's mouth twitched. Rain raised one hand, horizontal, flat and level. Look at that, hey. Look at my hand. Look into my eyes. Yeah. You see that? Rain, what are you doing? Evelyn cursed. What kind of nonsense is this? Shoo, I hissed. I'd seen Rain do this before. She knew what she was doing, even if it was a bit mad. Do I believe I can beat you? Rain asked July, her voice barely above a whisper. Not can I, but do I believe I can? July looked for a long, long time. Just when I thought she was making a point of not answering, she opened her mouth. Yes, she said. Rain winked, clicked her tongue, and stepped away from the demon. She dusted her hands off. Think I've made my point. What are you? Jan asked, boggling at Rain. Not with an unbound zombie, Evelyn grumbled. Yeah, Rain went on. But I'm making our insurance policy clear. That's me, by the way. Living insurance. She pointed at herself with both thumbs. Twill snorted. Evelyn shook her head. Zheng let out an unimpressed rumble. I sighed, but actually I could have leapt at Rain and kissed her for that. She'd made our shared position very clear. I still wasn't comfortable, but I wasn't the only one consumed by jealousy. At least Rain could attempt to exert some control. Rain caught my eye and shot me a wink too. I felt myself blush. She was irrepressible. Location, 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 Preem intoned, prompting the rest of us. Yes, quite. Jan cleared her throat. Where is this going to happen? If it must. Good question, Evelyn grumbled, frowning at January. I'd offer our back garden, but we do have neighbors. And it's not happening indoors. Yes, absolutely. I'm not paying for those sorts of damages. There's always the woods, Twill said. Way out, where nobody really goes. Always the risk of a stray hiker, Evelyn said. No. A light bulb went on in my head. I did have a way to exert control. To make this legitimate. To make it somewhat mine. My tentacles wrapped around my torso like armor. I felt small and wretched and guilty, but I said the words regardless. I think I know somewhere private, I said. With a lot of space. Where we won't do any damage, or be interrupted. Something in my tone made everyone look at me. Even Jing finally looked. I stared back at her, my throat like acid. If we're going to organize a duel, I said. We may as well have a proper audience. An audience of experts. Shaman. If you're going to do this, do it right. Do it outside, in front of the round table. Out on the quiet plain. Outside, in my domain. It was one thing to wallow chin deep in the dank and toxic swamps of my own poorly examined jealousy, to declare that I would force Zhang and July to stage their sexually charged ritual combat out on the quiet plain, where I could play the role of elevated voyeur and exert some kind of control over my rapidly crumbling relationship. But it was another matter entirely to actually organize a group trip outside. As Rain would put it, my mouth had written a check that my posterior was incapable of backing with hard currency. Self-indulgence was easy, logistics took the better part of 3 days. And I almost did it. A second of stunned silence and skeptical stares followed my corrosive demand. In that second, I felt all my muscles tense with a desire to spring across the room, before a more sensible soul could argue me down or present a less dangerous option. My 6 tentacles bunched and curled, 2 of them swinging around to brace against the floorboards behind me like a pair of springs, the others coiling with the constrictive promise of jellyfish stingers, ready to entangle July and slap into Zheng, uncaring of who else got caught in the crossfire. Instinctively, I knew I was probably about to bruise myself by bouncing off the wall like the bag of bones I was, but the drive was too strong to ignore. I had no idea about July's strength, but there was no way I could keep myself wrapped around Zheng for more than a few seconds. Tentacles or no, Zheng was fully capable of peeling me off herself like an overeager octopus. She could dump me on the floor, squealing and lashing, helpless. But Zheng loved me. She was very reluctant to hurt me. In that moment, driven by the twisted-up knot of abyssal territorialism and confused guilt, I was ready to exploit that love. All I needed was her split second of hesitation in which to work the familiar old brain math, and send us all spiraling outside. I was being an idiot, but a very specific kind of idiot. Outside, somebody hissed, incredulous. I think that was Evelyn. I must have been vibrating with anticipation, visibly about to spring like a coiled squid, because 2 things happened at the same time: an iron vice closed around my upper arm, and a voice cut through my jealous haze. Heather, Evelyn was suddenly snapping in my face. Heather. Why yes. I croaked, more animal than person. I took a moment to blink, to draw a deep breath down my constricted throat, to remember where and who and what I was. I was not a squid about to pounce on hard-shelled prey and crack it open with my beak. I had to swallow quite hard, forcing my throat back into the right shape, fighting down the urge to hiss. My tentacles relaxed, though rather grudgingly, their support structure muscles tense and tight inside my torso. I winced with referred pain running up and down my flanks. "Is she all right?" somebody asked, their voice still hazy and distant. "I think that was January. What's wrong with her?" "Evie." I tried again, then realized who was holding my arm. Hi Preem." "Hello," said Preem, still holding my upper left arm in one hand, as if I was about to run away. She must have crossed the small room in 2 or 3 strides to grab me. Her blank, milk-white eyes bored into mine. Evelyn was frowning up a thunderstorm, equal parts concern, alarm, and disapproval. The rest of the room wasn't much better. Jan's eyes had gone terribly wide at my tentacles. Rain was watching Zheng with her hands on her hips. Zheng herself was peering at me in curious quasi-arousal, lips parted, eyes alert, as if she liked what she'd just seen me about to tackle her. At least Twill was oblivious to the whole thing, looking like she'd stepped into a soap opera episode halfway through the plot, without her lines memorized. "Evie." I'm fine," I said. "Your idea makes sense," Evelyn said to me, slow and careful with each syllable, watching me as if the wrong word might make me explode into tentacles and gibbering. "It makes sense. Yes. Outside is the best place for them to fight, if we have to go along with this nonsense at all. But I insist we do this properly." "Heather." "Properly," I echoed. Had to swallow again. My whole body felt like a knot of muscle. "Yes. Right. Properly. I insist, do you understand?" Yes, of course, yes." My face was burning with mortified embarrassment. I could barely look Evelyn in the eye, let alone round on Zheng or check on Rain. Part of me still toyed with the equation to send myself out, just to escape this moment. "Any trip outside requires we take contingencies and precautions," Evelyn went on, staring at me like I'd just sleepwalked onto a motorway, voice sharp as a barbed whip. I wanted to cringe and shrink. "And this is my responsibility. I'm not letting you swan off again without a gateway prepared and ready to use, even if it is just over to Lozzie's Tin Man storage. And even if you have Zheng there to look after you." She huffed like a steam engine and fussed at Preem's hand on my arm. "Go on, let go of her, she's fine. Here, let me." Preem allowed herself to be disengaged from my arm like a well-oiled wool clamp. Evelyn took her place, very awkwardly patting my hand and then taking it in hers, still frowning at me like she'd eaten an entire lemon, skin and all. Yes, I forced myself to say out loud. "Yes, safety first. Safety first. A gateway, you did say that, didn't you? I suppose I can hardly go alone." "Alone?" Zheng purred, then chuckled, a dark rumble from a dark place. "Shaman, you want a private show, these gladiators all your own." The Say Fox, still in her arms, joined in the chuckle with a yerp sound. "Not exactly," I whispered, my throat too thick for more words. I couldn't look up, couldn't meet Zheng's eyes. Evelyn squeezed my hand so hard it ground my finger bones together. I winced, but she didn't let up until I looked at her. She frowned at me, hard and searching, not liking what she found. "Evie." I whispered to her alone, but she didn't respond. "I am content with any audience," July said. Zheng nodded to her and I hated that. "Excuse me," Jan piped up from next to July. Her head of fluffy black hair peered around July's hip as if she'd been hiding behind the demon host. "I need a tiny bit of clarification here, just a teensy-weensy word of unpacking the issue. You're talking about taking this duel outside?" She pronounced the word like it was from an unfamiliar language, raising her thumb and forefinger pinched together, squinting in an effort to control her reaction. "That's your word for the spheres beyond, isn't it? The beyond, the spirit realms, the cradle of gods." Evelyn sighed. "Outside is an infinitely less Chinibyu term." Twill pulled a baffled squint. Unless what term? Nothing, Evelyn grunted. Even you aren't internet poisoned enough for that one. An edgy term, let's put it that way. That's hardly the issue here, Jan said, in the tone of somebody who had just discovered their car had been compacted into a neat metal cube. The spheres beyond. Outside is the shaman's preference, Zheng rumbled, so outside it is. Jan sighed, wet her lips, and cleared her throat with the effort of somebody being conned out of a lot of money. Outside then. That's somewhere that you people can just go. Just like that. To have a fight. Like wandering down to an empty park or something. The shaman knows the way, Zheng said. Bloody right she does, Twill sighed. 'S not easy though. Jan slowly went pale. You're joking. This is a sick joke. This isn't funny. It is deadly serious, Evelyn said, frowning a pinched frown right back at January. We have ways and means of getting there. They will not be revealed to you. Do not try to steal them. It won't be in private, July said, back to staring at Zheng. Ha! Zheng barked right back at her. The glory for all to see. There's nothing to be afraid of, I said, finding my conversational feet once again. At least this was a topic I understood well. We have access to a couple of different outside dimensions which we know are safe. One of them has a lot of open space. That's the place I was talking about. How can you possibly know it's safe? Jan spread her arms at me in a very frustrated little shrug. We've partly colonized it, I said. I mean, one of us has. She's not here right now. And it's not really colonizing, she's built a metaphorical round table there. You know, King Arthur's round table, I mean. But out of thoughts. Kind of. There's knights. Jan looked at me like I was completely off my rocker. Sorry, I said. I've been there, Evelyn grumbled. Heather is doing a particularly terrible job of communicating right now, please do forgive her. It's perfectly safe. Trust me, I didn't want to go either. If we're going to do this nonsense, we might as well do it right, where there's no chance of us being seen. This is already an utter waste of time and energy, the last thing I want is for it to spiral off into an unrelated crisis. Understand? Plus there's plenty of security, I said, trying to convince myself. The knights. Jan looked at each of our faces, eyes wide with horrified awe. Rain gave her a thumbs up. Zheng rumbled with satisfaction. Twill muttered something about hoping there's a horizon this time. There is, I reassured her. It's kind of normal. Except the sky. Oh, except the sky. Jan burst out. That's all right then, perfectly fine. We are not doing this. Yes we are, July said without missing a beat. Jan threw her hands up, stomped over to the open sports bag on the floor, and awkwardly went down on her knees to rummage around in the clothes. Right, then I want danger pay. And not from you lot. She looked up at myself and the others, to make her point clear, then pointed at July. From you. This is your fault. If we get eaten by a mountain of flesh, or turned into seedbeds for some extra-dimensional worms, or zombified by brain-eating plants, you are to blame. I am always to blame for your pains, said July. And your half of these Sherrowford jobs is going towards the new dresses, Jan added with a huff. I will starve for your fashion. Jan finally found what she was looking for in the bag, struggling to pull out a huge white coat that looked about 3 sizes too large for her, complete with massive hood, fur-trimmed rim, and lots of very thick padding. It unraveled other clothes as it came, apparently heavier than it looked. She straightened up and shook it out with some effort. And I am bloody well going armored, she said, then turned to Evelyn. Let's get this over with. This is madness. Yes, I whispered, mostly to myself. It is. Actually, Evelyn said, clearing her throat and frowning at the coat, this is going to take a day or two to prepare. We have to build the gate from scratch. I'm not having us do this the quick and dirty way. That's unsafe. Evelyn sighed. You can put your suit of armor away for now. A day or two. Zheng rumbled. Wizard? I'm not exaggerating. Evelyn shot Zheng a very unimpressed look. Why, is that too long for you? Going to elope with your new friend when you have to wait a bit? Deal with it. Zheng rumbled deep in her throat. You will, I forced myself to say. You will come home with us, right, Zheng? For you, shaman, she replied. Rain laughed, a good-natured belly chuckle, trying to throw the tension off like a heavy blanket. I think it's time we exchanged numbers, instead of threats, hey. Jan made a noise of pure, wordless frustration, stamping her foot and throwing the coat down. Something inside it audibly clanked against the floorboards. Just what I need, she tooted. Delays. So, hey, Rain said. What was that all about, Heather? Fancy talking? She had her hands propped behind her head as she leaned on the backboard of our bed, bare legs stretched out in front of her over the rumpled sheets, crossed at the ankles, caressed by the milky gray light filtering in through the window. A cartoonish exaggeration of her own unstudied relaxation. I stared at the open book on my crossed legs, not really seeing the words. Could barely make out the print anyway, not in the dying light of a rainy evening. That would require me to get up, cross the room, switch on the lamp, then cross back to the bed and sit down again, all of which seemed like far too much to bother with. I opened my mouth, about to say something utterly inane, something like what was what all about, Rain. I haven't the faintest clue what you're talking about. I'm just hunky-dory with the third point of our barely stable triangle deciding to have a de facto romantic fling with somebody she's only just met. But I didn't say that, because it was the opposite of true. I frowned at the book. Heather. I may as well ask you the same thing, I said, sounding out every inch of my grumpy pout. What was that all about? You really have to ask. Rain chuckled. I sighed and surrendered. This book is upside down. I tooted and turned the book right way up. What even is this? I flapped the cover over. Oh, this is yours. Who is Auckland? What am I even reading here? Philosophy, Rain said. You can't ask me a serious emotional question when you're not wearing anything, I said. I'm wearing a t-shirt and underwear. And hey, socks. Rain wiggled her toes. I turned away, though I didn't actually want to. And hey, right back at you. I'm fully clothed. You can't return from a serious emotional crucible and instantly pick up a book and start reading it, Rain shot back, though with a smile in her voice. Literally, you can't. Not only was it one of my philosophy books, it was upside down. You have been defeated. Soundly. It wasn't instant, I said, my voice a touch too high. I crossed my arms and frowned at the bedroom door, which was currently closed to keep the rest of the house firmly out for a while. I checked on Sevens. We made sure Evie had her stuff. We saw Twill off. Silence descended, to match the rainy dusk. It was almost evening, on the same day as our rash yet ultimately superfluous attempt at gunboat diplomacy with Jan and July. Sunset was cloistered behind thick, dark rain clouds. The day dribbled away beneath a leaden sky as drizzle blanketed Sherrowford with cold and damp. Spring was no respite from this kind of weather, especially in the north. Light like static turned every surface and angle into an indistinct mockery. Number 12, Barnslow Drive felt as subdued as we were after the stress and tension of the day, quiet and recovering, though I could hear the muffled sounds of Preem in the kitchen and the occasional deep rumble of Zheng's voice somewhere far below talking to Evelyn, I supposed. We'd been home for just over an hour, and now Rain and I were alone in our bedroom together, not an uncommon situation, but one I was uniquely unprepared for right then. I hadn't unpacked any of my knotted-up feelings. It felt strange to simply return home after all that impending violence, but what else was there to do? Sometimes a thing happens and then you just go home afterwards. That's life. Jan and Evelyn had swapped mobile phone numbers and promised to begin coordinating the play date as soon as practicable, though Evelyn had heavily implied that any attempted magical trickery over the phone would earn Jan a sharp rebuke. We'd bid our new and reluctant acquaintances an awkward goodbye, and then headed home. Zheng had donned her hat and pulled up her scarf and vanished into an alleyway. With the fox still in her arms, she would stand out rather badly if she took the bus with the rest of us. By the time we got home, she was already there, and she'd lost the fox. The eaters of the dead have their own paths, shaman, she'd explained. A fox will not be caged and remain a fox. She wanted to go. She went. Evelyn had sighed heavily at that. Blasted thing. Can't even communicate properly. The following hour had been awkward in the extreme. We'd all needed to peel off the sigil paper stuck to our bellies and backs, the glue residue itching like nettle stings until properly washed off. Twill had opted to head home herself, giving us all funny looks before she'd slipped out of the front door. But I couldn't think straight, I could barely look Xing in the eye. I walked around like I was a zombie myself, pulled on automatic strings to change my clothes and washed the glue off and check if Evelyn needed any help setting up the gateway to the quiet plane. She'd stared at me in the magical workshop, still frowning with a shade of how she had back in Jan's bedsit, sucking on her teeth. I'm serious, I'd said. Evie. I want to help, if there's anything I can do. You want to help, she echoed in a grumble, then sighed. Yes and no. She'd stomped over to the table in the workshop and picked up a tiny plastic food bag, which had been lying near my squid skull mask. I stared at the mask with instinctive longing to wedge it on over my head, to hide from the world, from Jing especially. My beautiful giant demon was lurking in the utility room, like she'd been banished there. I had Lozzie bring me these, a couple of days ago, Evelyn was saying, waving the plastic bag between thumb and forefinger. I pulled my attention away from my guarded retreat. The bag contained a few blades of rubbery yellow grass. I did suspect we might end up needing to do this at some point. Though not for such a stupid and wasteful reason. Is that grass from the quiet plain? Quite, Evelyn said with a sigh. The dimension needs a better name than that. You're not much for creative names. Sorry. Evelyn blinked, then frowned harder. That was a gentle joke. You don't need to apologize for it. Not to me. I shrugged. Sorry, Evie, I'm just a bit frazzled. By the day. Evidently, she said, tight and low. So, how does the grass work? What's it for? It's a focus, Evelyn went on, though her easy words did not match the way she looked at me, her brow knitted with dark concern. That frown made me feel like I should apologize again, shrink away, curl up and never return, but I stood my ground. The same way we were eventually able to rebuild the gateway equations to connect with Carcosa, using that book you brought back from the library. Same principle, different outside plane. It's probably a good idea regardless, to set up a permanent gateway there. A staging ground, perhaps, for going deeper. I'll probably still need Lozzie's help though, like before. She huffed and slapped the bag back down on the table, shaking her head. Listen to me, permanent gateways to outside, a good idea. I would have dunked my own head in the sink for suggesting such a thing a few months ago. Look what you've done to me, Heather, HM. Look what you've done to me. Her stare cut right through my flesh. I managed a weak smile. One of my tentacles tried to reach for her, but then stopped halfway. We'll be safe, I said, though part of me knew that wasn't what we were really discussing. I know we will. Evelyn grunted, and turned away. I found no refuge in the advice of my resident expert on lesbian relationship drama. We'd left Sevens at home during the expedition to confront Jan, partly because she wasn't so much gunboat as potential atomic bomb, and partly because forcing her to use that bomb would risk the stability of her new and tender selfhood. So she'd stayed with Lozzie and Tenny. I found them all in Lozzie's room, taking a nap together, tucked under the covers and lined up like matryoshka dolls. Tenny spooning Lozzie, who was in turn spooning Sevens, limbs everywhere, sheets tangled, lots of snoring going on. And Zheng wouldn't come upstairs, wouldn't come to our bedroom. She was lurking in the utility room and kitchen, watching Preem cook alongside Whistle. She had more fellow feeling with the corgi than with me right then. So now it was just me, Rain with her trousers off, and the rainstorm drumming on the roof. Silence dragged on for long enough to become suspicious. I felt an itch between my shoulder blades, a premonition that Rain had silently gone up on her knees and crawled toward me on the bed. Perhaps she was about to apply a very physical solution to my emotional constipation. I wouldn't have said no, only I knew I was incapable of enjoying sex right then. Rain, please don't. I looked back over my shoulder, but Rain was still leaning against the headboard. She hadn't moved an inch. The silence had not heralded an attempt to solve my problems with aggressive, overwhelming, toe-curling sex, but had instead concealed an increasingly wide and shit-eating grin on Rain's face. "Don't what?" she asked. "Oh, fine." I exploded at last, uncrossing my arms and flinging them wide. My one currently manifested tentacle did the same, flying out and coiling like a fist in wordless frustration. "I'm jealous, okay?" Saying the word felt like dislodging a bolus of rotten meat from inside my throat, foul juices running down my gullet even as the pressure finally released. I hiccuped, loud and angry, like the warning cry of some marine bottom feeder. "I admit it," I went on, at the edge of shouting. "I'm really, really jealous of all this, of Zheng, of what she's doing with this July person." To my everlasting relief, Rain did not laugh, she didn't even keep grinning. The grin folded up and vanished before I'd even gotten the first word out, replaced with a subtle and reassuring smile. She nodded along until I finished. "That wasn't what I meant," I huffed, turning sulky as my anger flared out. "Besides, it's hardly fair. It's not July's fault. It's Zheng's." "Hey, Heather," Rain cooed softly, radiating all the warmth I'd ever needed. "It's okay to admit you feel jealous, yeah. Better than letting it eat you up inside. You should go tell Zheng about it too, clear the air. She'll understand." "Well, she probably will, in her own way. Probably say something about wolves and trees. Right?" I shrugged, shaking my head, feeling like I had a lump of burning coal in the center of my chest. Then I looked up at Rain with a raised eyebrow. She laughed and shrugged too, but far more casual and relaxed. "Hey," she said, "you don't even have to say it. I know, that's kinda rich coming from me, preaching to you about jealousy." I was not thinking that. I blurted out. "Yeah, you were. Even if it was only subconscious. But hey, it's cool." Rain spread her hands. "You told me, yourself, you said it's okay to be jealous. But that was you, this is me, this is Heather." Rain's voice held just a touch of a whip crack, enough to make me sit up and pay attention, to stop me wallowing in useless guilt. "You showed me that jealousy is just something you have to work through sometimes. I believed in you then, and I believe in you now. Stop beating yourself up. You don't get to do that, not on my watch." I forced myself to hold Rain's gaze for a few more seconds, then sniffed loudly and scrubbed at my eyes. She scooted over on the bed and her hand found my side, stroking and patting until I could look up again. I stared out of the window for a moment, into the haze of clouds, then back down at Rain's soft brown eyes, so much the opposite to her body, muscles like bunched cable beneath her skin. "I love you, Rain," I said. "But I don't deserve your faith in this. I feel like I shouldn't be jealous of Zheng. Like it's not justified, somehow." "Why not?" Rain asked a genuine question, like always, no prejudgment in her words. Her casual tone unlocked my heart. "Because it's a fight." I sighed. It's not as if she slept with July or something. They spent several days doing their level best to murder each other. And I get the feeling this play fight is going to be extremely bloody. It's hardly something I should feel jealous of. I certainly wouldn't want to participate in it. Wouldn't I? A tiny whisper of abyssal instinct crawled up my spine. My single tentacle bunched and coiled. Rain waited a beat. But for Zheng, fighting is like a 3-course meal at a fancy restaurant, I said, turning bitter with sarcasm. Whining and dining before sweeping her partner home for a night of athletic sex. Because of her vampire, right? The one from the story she told. I nodded. Because of her vampire friend. I can't be that for her, I can't. Can't. A tiny voice whispered. You have 6 strong tentacles. You can plate yourself in armor. You could bring Jing down. I huffed at myself. No, I couldn't, not in a straight fight, no matter what nonsense my brain was feeding me. Hey, there's stuff you can't be to me, Rain said, that doesn't mean you gotta be jealous. That's different. I frowned. I think. Are you seriously afraid you're going to lose Jing? Rain asked. Oh, no, I said, suddenly coming up short and feeling very silly indeed. Not lose her. Not like that. I'm just uncomfortable with all this. With her doing this with somebody else. Somebody I don't know. It's not fair. Yeah, Rain said slowly, letting out a deep sigh. Me too. I looked down at Rain on the bed. She'd rolled over almost onto her front, one bare leg waving half-raised in the air, her hand still lingering at my side, her hips cupped between the mattress and the milky light filtering through the window. My Rain, deceptively cuddly when she wanted to be, but she couldn't hide the buttery smooth flexibility of her muscles, the alert listening of her face, the way she saw right through me. You're not just mirroring my jealousy, are you? I asked. The wrong question or the right question, if one happens to be a fan of watching one's very athletic girlfriend curl off the bed like a wolf rising from repose. Which, obviously, I was. Rain stopped waving one leg in the air, paused for a moment as she watched me with sudden curiosity, then rolled the other way, hit the edge of the bed, and sprang to her feet all in one fluid motion. Muscles uncoiled like springs. Her arms fanned through the haze of dim gray light, as if in slow motion, dappled by the haze of drizzling rain outdoors. As she turned, the static gloom picked out the uneven rut of the scar on her upper left thigh. The bullet wound was mostly healed now, at least to the point that she didn't need a dressing and gauze anymore. No more weeping plasma and thin blood into a pad of cotton wool. But when backlit by the gray halo of the rainstorm outside, the fresh scar looked like a jagged fingertip of razor blades had been drawn across her flesh, punctuated around the edges by the marks where the stitches had pierced her skin. A mass of angry red scar tissue puckered around the shallow wound of Stack's bullet. It took an expert in Rain's personal musculature to see the way it upset her balance ever so slightly, the way she still favored the opposite leg. I happen to be such an expert. Rain reached her arms above her head, rolled her neck from side to side, and started stretching her leg muscles in a practiced sequence. With the gray light behind her, she was like a shade, a shadow in the gloom. From my angle on the bed I could barely make out her expression. No, she said after a moment, a contemplative purr, weak. Light playing over her goose-pimpled thighs. No. I'm not mirroring you, Heather. I don't like the idea of Zheng fighting somebody for pleasure. Me neither, I said. Unless it's me, Rain added. I swallowed a hiccup. Ah. Oh. Right. Rain paused, her hands on her hips, head sideways as if listening for something beyond my range of hearing, a fellow ghost lurking out in the drizzle. The light framed her profile, unsmiling, knife-edge sharp. Didn't expect to feel that, she said. Hadn't thought about it before. Hell, Jing just ain't my type. But if it was a fight, yeah. Yeah, that's mine. I want that from her. She owes me that. Oh no, I breathed, an excited yet terrified tremor in my chest. They were both beyond me. Rain, no. You can't. Rain turned back to me, plunging her expression into backlit gloom. The light glowed through the individual strands of her hair, turning chestnut to gray. You think I was joking, earlier, she asked. No, not exactly. Rain, we've been over this, you and she promised not to fight. I thought you got this out of your systems with the fighting games. And she's a demon, Rain. You've seen her fight. You don't think I would win? Her question was barely above a whisper, a predatory purr that froze me to the spot. I could not answer. I was not supposed to answer. Rain took a deep breath, a cleansing breath, filling her lungs and closing her eyes. Then, to my aesthetic delight but emotional dismay, she grabbed the hem of her t-shirt and pulled it off over her head, unwrapping herself like a sword from a sheath, letting the t-shirt fall to the floor. Abdominal muscles flexed, hip bones jutted, shoulders rolled. But there was no moment of gloating grin, no pause in which she savored the way her nearly nude form overpowered me like a chokehold, no subtle flicker of her tongue across her lips as she watched my reaction. She didn't even look at me. For once, there was nothing sexual in her sudden disrobing. Instead of reaching for me, she reached for her knife. Rain picked up her matte black combat knife from where it lay on her bedside table, safely tucked away in its own sheath. But she drew the blade in the same way she had drawn herself, dropping the sheath like an afterthought. Naked metal soaked up the milky light from the window behind her. My breath stuck in my throat, a thrill of dangerous excitement pounding through my head. Two more of my tentacles had manifested as well, curling close to my body like armor. I knew that Rain would never hurt me, she would never even joke with the knife, she was always so careful, so responsible, but I'd never seen her like this before. There was something unfamiliar about the way she moved now, something new, something not meant for me. She stood very still, haloed by the gloom, knife held in one hand, her other hand with fingers splayed by her side, head raised and eyes closed, breathing slightly too hard. Slowly she raised the knife and touched the flat of the blade to her own chest, over her heart. I would win, she murmured. I could do it. I can see how to do it. Rain, I said, and found my voice quivering. You're talking about killing somebody I love. Her lips curled into a familiar smile. That was more like my Rain. But she still didn't open her eyes. The knife lowered, slicing through rain-dappled air. She spun the blade in her hand, a flourish that I couldn't quite follow, ending with the knife held reversed, ready for a strike from an unexpected angle. Not killing. Beating. In a duel. First blood, first pin to the mat, something like that. Not to the death. You don't have to fight her because I'm hurt, I said, barely able to squeeze the words out. I love you, Heather, Rain said, still low and soft. But it's not for you. I drew in a shuddering breath. This is all very, very edgy, Rain. Could you at least put the knife away? Please. Rain chuckled and the spell broke. She opened her eyes, retrieved the sheath from the floor, and slid the knife safely away. I breathed a sigh of relief. Don't sound so worried, hey, she said, tossing the knife back onto the bedside table. I think this is just how Zhang and I work. So yeah, I'm jealous too. I've half a mind to go slap her one right now. Don't. Oh, Rain, don't, please, that isn't going to make anything better. Might provoke a fight, Rain said. Then I get to claim it. Don't. Oh, I don't think I can deal with that on top of everything else. What if it was Twill, or Preem fighting her? Would you feel the same then? Do you have to follow this line of thought? I'm sorry. She cracked a grin. She was still beautiful, framed from behind by the stormlight through the window, half naked and curved like a dream, a fallen angel risen from the damp concrete and abandoned corners of Sherrowford, to bless me with a vision I still did not deserve. My beautiful, wounded, guardian angel, who had taken a bullet for me, unfolded herself and kept unfolding at the merest touch. Now who's being edgy? I scolded myself. I'm not comfortable with what Zheng is doing either, but I get it, Rain said. I get my own reactions to all this, and you know why. Because you've made me own up to them before. You made me take them head on, like watching a film of an oncoming train without flinching. But you, Heather. Damn, girl, you are lost. She shook her head and sat down, her darkly angelic halo melting away into the air, just Rain again as she planted her backside on the bed and shot me a smirk. Here, let's do a thought experiment. I love thought experiments. Okay. I said, bewildered but smiling, taken along by Rain's confidence and bluster and her semi-nudity, of course. I struggled not to stare at her body instead of her face. Maybe put your t-shirt back on though. I'm going to have trouble concentrating otherwise. Sorry. Rain paused, blinked at me, then broke into a grin. Feeling a little hot under the collar? Yes. I scolded. Of course. You're practically naked. What do you think? It's not like you don't see this every day. That doesn't make any difference. Rain cracked a grin, so different to just a few moments earlier, radiating cheeky confidence. She flexed one arm. I think you're sweating at the sight of these lethal weapons. Rain. I batted at her. She laughed, sprang up from the bed, and scooped her t-shirt off the floor. I watched her wriggle back into it, a tiny bit sad to see her covered up again, though painfully aware we had more important matters to discuss. Though I did wonder, in the back of my mind, if that little show had been intentional, to help guide me through the sucking swamps and stinging thorns of my own jealousy. Right, thought experiment, Rain repeated. She held up a finger. Imagine me. She tapped her chest. Imagine me, making out with another girl. I blinked. My smile tugged wider. Okay. No, I'm serious. Really try to picture it, as realistically as you can. Me, all hot and bothered, with my tongue down some other girl's throat, really into it. I cleared my own throat, starting to blush. I can't. I can't really imagine that. Who? Who are you kissing in this imaginary scenario? Anybody. She threw her hands up, grinning. Pick the prettiest girl from one of your uni classes and imagine I've got my hand down her knickers. I frowned with effort, but felt nothing in particular. This is silly. Why? Rain asked, as if this was the point. Because you wouldn't do it. You just wouldn't. Or if you did, I'd be watching. I think. Outside nightmare dimensions and alien god-kings and unspeakable geometries were all well and good, but I couldn't imagine Rain cheating on me. That was far more unthinkable. Okay, how about, Rain cast around, then scooped up one of the video game boxes from by the telly. She flopped back down on the bed and turned the box to me. How about her? It was the game she'd been playing on and off for the last couple of months, the one with the anime girls doing alchemy, with lots of timers and silly battles against cartoonish slime monsters and goblins and such. The front cover of the box was graced with art of the game's protagonist, an overly bubbly and implausibly endowed young woman wearing a white waistcoat, a jacket falling off her bare shoulders, and a pair of miniature shorts which barely contained her hips. Her. I echoed, frowning and laughing at the same time. The one you've been making jiggle every time she jumps. Yeah. Rain nodded. Imagine I'm making out with her. Because, hey, I would. Look at her. She tapped the box art. Wouldn't say no to getting suffocated by either end of her, if you know what I mean. Rain, I tooted. This is just silly, she's not real. Rain put the box down and narrowed her eyes. Okay, time for live ammo. I blinked. Pardon? What if I said I wanted to make out with Kimberly? My eyes went wide. Do you? Thought experiment, remember? I mean, but you don't. I dunno. Rain shrugged, pulling a thoughtful face. She's mousy and kinda skittish, I can get down with that. Hasn't got your spine, but she's real cute all the same. I could see myself pinning her against a wall and making her squirm. Do you think she squeaks when she? Rain, I snapped, no longer amused. Rain, this is Kimberly you're talking about. Have a little respect. Rain laughed. Thought experiment. Still. Thought experiment, Rain repeated like a mantra, trying to sound sober and serious, though I could tell she was having far too much fun with this. Imagine, right now, that I get up, go into Kimberly's room, and offer her £100 to spend an hour in bed with me. Rain. I squeaked, outraged. That is completely. Thought experiment. Unacceptable. Kim doesn't have a lot of money, she was practically in poverty before moving. Heather, I'm trying to make a in with us, it's not even funny as a joke, I don't want to hear. Heather, Rain spoke my name with a touch of command. I flinched and stopped, but kept frowning at her. Hey, Heather, you're running away from the point I'm trying to make. You're doing real good at it, too, sprinting away from me here. I blushed and crossed my arms. Well, it's just absurd. I know you wouldn't do something like that, so it's hard to picture. From live ammo to hollow point, Rain murmured. I'm sorry. My jaw dropped. I stared at her, trying to figure out how much of this was more hypothetical act than reality. You're teasing me. Aren't you? Nah. Rain shook her head, wiggling her eyebrows and allowing herself a dirty smirk. Come on, did you see her? Absolutely my type. I mean what? Real short, kinda like you, very easy to pick her up and princess carry her. Sweet and fluffy and cute as a button, Rain explained, her grin growing. Didn't you notice? She's about your height, though even through that cardigan I could tell she's got quite a bit more titty. Rain. I practically shrieked. But what's really important is that hidden layer of thorns. A con artist with a mousy streak. Oh, come on, Heather, can't you see it? Can you imagine how she would react if I came on to her, strong? Like I do with you. She'd be quivering and blushing, but she'd be trying to put on a brave face too. Rain bit her lip. And did you see how she hid behind July at one point? Oh my goodness. Rain laughed, patting her ribs over her own heart. I could eat her up. I stared, speechless, taking a moment to process and recover. You're saying all this to get me to react. Rain laughed. Yeah, but it's also a little bit true. But you wouldn't. Course I wouldn't. It would be a bloody nightmare. For all I know, she's got a thing with July, and I ain't butting in on that. And even if she was into it, she might require a bit more emotional commitment than I'd be willing to give. But, I do kinda want to. And that's the point. How does it make you feel, Heather? Jealous? Oh, I breathed, catching up at last as the shock receded. Thought experiment, indeed. Well, no, actually. You're telling me about it right now. It's a bit much. But how can I be jealous if you're telling me about it? Exactly, Rain said. I boggled at her, so she went on. Think about it for a sec, Heather. I chewed on my bottom lip, looking at Rain, then staring out of the window at the drizzle against the glass. I truly did not feel jealous at this idea she found Jan attractive. I tried to imagine her sweeping the diminutive Mage off her feet and making out with her, but the mental image just made me grimace with how silly it all seemed. She wouldn't not without permission. I don't feel jealous, I said. Because I know that you aren't going anywhere. And you're asking first. Even if it is hypothetical. And Zheng is going somewhere? Rain prompted. No. But, I sighed. She's not mine. I don't have a right to exert control. Abyssal instinct screamed the lie in every cell of my body. I may not have had sex with Zheng, but I had claimed her body and soul in a very real sense, back when I had healed her wounds after our fight with the greasy, fleshy giant, Burenju. I had sliced the necrotic flesh from around her bite wounds with my own pneumosomatic teeth, and drooled antiseptic mucus into her bloodstream, gifting her flesh with the extranormal white blood cells manufactured in my trilobe reactor organ, my biological approximations of abyssal principles, wrought from impossible energies in our reality. I had entered her, saturated her, part of me was in her. Zheng was mine, instinct said. Sex did not give one any claim on another person. Even I knew that, with my extremely limited, all-rain experience. A dull ache was throbbing inside the tip of one of my tentacles, the beginning of the alchemical process of pneumosomatic transformation, separating and multiplying the stem cell analogues that would become a biosteel needle and turgid fluid sacs. I winced and squinted, concentrating for a moment to halt and reverse the process. A horrible, sick guilt grew like a toxic bubble in my gut as I realized what was happening. My body wanted to inject Zheng with the same regenerative ichor that I had used to heal the forest knight. My body wanted to claim her, again. Heather? Rain asked, suddenly sharp, following my gaze to the tentacle, where she couldn't see anything. Evelyn still had the modified 3D glasses downstairs. What's wrong? Nothing, I blurted out, feeling like I was trying to dunk myself under a cold shower. I reeled the tentacle in, forced it down, and had half a mind to fold them all away until the feeling passed, racked with shame. I felt guilty for being jealous. For not wanting Zheng to do this. I feel like I'm trying to claim her. Rain nodded. Then you need to talk to her about it. I'm not sure I can. I said, despairing at what I might do if Zheng figured out what I really wanted, what I needed. She would probably say yes. I wish she'd just. You wish she'd called you in the first place? When she'd run into July, yes. If she liked her so much, she should have just let me know. Yeah, Rain sighed. Exactly. When it comes to this poly thing, begging for forgiveness is definitely not easier than asking permission. You think you'd feel different if she'd come home and checked first? Maybe. I shook my head, even deeper in guilt than when we'd started this conversation. I wanted to violate Zheng. I was a horrible little toxic thing, I needed to be flung back into the ocean abyss with the rest of the predators. It's too late for that now. Hey, Heather, Rain purred. She leaned in close and pulled me into a hug. She must have recognized how distraught and torn up I felt. But for a moment I couldn't hug her in return, consumed by guilt. Would I treat her like this, if she strayed? But she wouldn't. But what if she did? The aching tip of my tentacle twitched. I felt like squeezing it until it went numb. Then I gripped Rain back so hard it must have hurt. She held on until I finally relaxed, until the sound of the rain and the hazy gray light lulled me down, drowsy and heavy-lidded. Hey, Rain murmured as we parted, my hands lingering on her body. Maybe we can make things better by watching her fight. Maybe you can be part of it that way. She wanted to show off, after all. Maybe she wants to show off to you. Maybe it's for you. You should ask her about that. I shrugged. Maybe. And hey, even if it's not for you, she wants to share. She wants you to see her having fun, at least. That matters. She does love you, don't forget that. And I've chosen to love her in return, I murmured. Sometimes I feel like I don't understand where Zheng and I stand. But she's broken your trust. It's only a fight, not sex. I sighed, running my hands over each other. I should try to enjoy watching it, I suppose. I huffed. Oh, what am I saying? Enjoy watching a bloody fight between a pair of demons? Rain, it's going to be a nightmare. Rain laughed. Actually, I'm kind of looking forward to it. And to seeing this quiet plane and all the other nights. The round table dimension. Camelot. Can we call it that? We are not calling it Camelot. Is there like a Lancelot and a Percival and so on? Rain asked, grinning with the absurd nature of the question. Who's Arthur? Is that Lawsy? I think there's a Gawain, I said. Maybe. You met him. Rain blinked. No shit? I shrugged, not quite certain about that. I don't think Lawsy knows Arthurian legend very well. I doubt it's exact. I frowned at Rain, distracting myself from my own guilt. I'm not sure anybody else should be there in the first place though. What, at Camelot, to watch the fight? I'm not missing this, Heather. Last time I took you outside, I trailed off, my eyes moving down her body to the scar on her upper left thigh. Rain laughed. Unless Stack is there with a gun and new grudge, I don't think we have to worry about that. Evie's gonna have a gate up, and there's over 100 knights out there, right? We're gonna be totally safe. This is Lawsy's special secret base, right? You said yourself, it's safe. I suppose. Hey, look on the bright side, it might not even go ahead, Rain said, leaning back on the bed again. Sorry. I'd put 50 quid on Jan skipping town. Tonight. When's Evie supposed to call her? Soon, maybe. I think she might already have done so. I looked around for my phone, to check the time, but the deepening storm and the gathering dusk had slowly plunged the room into heavier shadows. I hadn't even noticed the cocoon of darkness gathering around us. It invited me to close my eyes and curl up, go to sleep, forget about all this. The house itself was trying to soothe me. What an absolutely stupid day this has been, I sighed. I don't think you're right, though. I don't think Jan can overrule July. The fight will go ahead. Rain pulled a smirk. But that was in front of us. Maybe in private, Jan's the one in charge, no questions, no nonsense. Maybe she cracks the whip behind closed doors. I tooted softly, but my heart wasn't in it. I could not summon any hope. You should really talk to Jing, you know. Rain went on, soft and serious again. She'll understand. Maybe, I muttered. But I couldn't. Jealousy was a horrible thing, the way it twisted me inside and out. I was disgusted with myself and gripped by the fear that Jing would see my true need on my face. I wanted to claim her, own her, make her mine. She, who had spent most of her life enslaved. I couldn't do that. Plain as day, right on my face. Right on my face. Rain, I said hesitantly, speaking into the static. Did Evie seem okay to you? What do you mean? She seemed like Evie, that much is sure. Well, I pictured Evelyn's face against the shadows, the way she'd been frowning at me since I'd almost gone full abyssal hellion to drag Jing outside. My mouth went dry. She's got a lot of work ahead of her, to make this gate. And she didn't seem very impressed with all this. I think. Yeah, our Evie is gonna be a touch grumpy, alright. A touch grumpy, I echoed. My blood was going cold with realization. I wasn't the only one feeling jealous, was I? We should probably do something for her, Rain was saying while my mind was racing ahead, about to slam into a mountainside guardrail and go off a cliff. She was really looking forward to watching cartoons with you, you know. She didn't say anything to me, but I could tell. She gets real intense and a little defensive when she's excited about something. It's kinda sweet, really, you get used to it and how to recognize. Do you think Twill has gotten home yet? I asked, trying to keep the quiver from my voice. Rain stopped and raised her eyebrows at me. It's just that I should maybe have a word with her. Perhaps. I'm not sure. Rain laughed. Got enough qualifiers there. TCH, I tooted. I'm serious. I need to have a word with her. With Twill. Yes. I nodded, holding fast to a fragile reed of courage. Before we let this fight go ahead. About Evie.